audience. Good evening. I'd like to call the March 12th meeting of the Placerville City Council to order. Would you all please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. If the clerk could please call the roll.
Mayor Acuna.
Present.
Councilmember Borelli. Here. Vice Mayor Zaragoza.
Here.
Councilmember Taylor. Here. Councilmember Thomas.
Present.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, good evening to everybody in the audience and our esteemed staff. Nice to see the sun still shining outside. And of course, it had to rain just a little bit. Moving on to item 3.1, brief comments by the City Council. I think I started to my left last week. Councilmember Taylor, do you have anything for Councilmember comments this evening?
Sure. Since the last meeting, I met with Dale Pierce of the RCD, and we discussed the challenges of fire grant administration. I attended the emergency ops training with Councilmember Borelli and city staff. I attended the informational SACOG meeting on Metropolitan Transportation Plan and the Sustainable Community Strategy, and I met with Terry from the Eldorado Arts Council.
Thank you. Councilmember Borelli.
I also attended the Transportation Plan Sustainable Communities meeting, and today I had the pleasure of, I was asked to speak at the Placerville Garden Club. They are celebrating their 1-year anniversary, and I tell you, these ladies, they started out with, I think they started with like under 20 people, and they're now up to 85. And they are, it's the most enthusiastic group, and they wanted to, they're willing to help if we need them. And so I told them we'd keep them informed, we'd put them on our list, and they're volunteer type thing, and great group of ladies, and it was really enjoyable. So.
Thank you. Anything else?
I think that was it.
All right. We'll have to see if the Flower Club is interested in pulling weeds. Councilmember Thomas.
I have nothing to report on today.
Thank you, Dennis. And Vice Mayor Zaragoza.
Just the same. We were all there at the SACOG regional briefing on the MTPSCS. That's about it.
All right. Thank you.
That was a great, I thought, informative meeting.
It was.
Yes, that was, and we will be expressing our appreciation for that to SACOG's executive director. I'd like to call on the city clerk at this time to announce the results of yesterday's planning commission interview process. We had 3 vacancies that were available on the city's planning commission. We had 5 candidates apply yesterday. The entire council spent a couple hours yesterday afternoon interviewing a very talented group of applicants. So if I could ask Regina to please announce who the successful candidates were.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Following a ballot vote, the 3 candidates appointed were incumbent John List, incumbent Christine Keeney, and new commissioner Amy Lepper. And these terms will expire March 1st, 2023.
2023. And they all took the oath of office yesterday afternoon immediately following the interview process, so they are now all sworn members of the Planning Commission. So again, thank you to them and the other folks that interviewed yesterday. We look forward to working with all of them over their next 4 years. For myself, I would just like to remind everybody that next week on the 21st, the Placerville Fire Safe Council is going to have their next meeting. Mm-hmm. And I have asked Councilmember Patty Borelli to be the council designee to that committee moving forward. This is something that is just new this year, so I think it's appropriate to have a council member attending those so that they know who their contact person is. I appreciate her willingness to stay involved in a very important topic. The Fire Safe Council is a wonderful new group of people with a lot of energy. They have access to some very useful funding opportunities, and recognizing that getting our properties clean can be very expensive and very difficult, especially for our older neighbors. So I appreciate Patty's willingness to take on that role, and it would be something that next year on our list of subcommittees and what have you should probably be something that the mayor is a regular part of the mayor's list of committees and commissions. I don't have the formal title in front of me. Also, as a second thing that's come up, I attended a meeting with the El Dorado Unified High School District last week, and as a result of state legislation, they are now required to hold 2 meetings a year that involve all the government leaders and all the emergency service providers to ensure campus safety. So that'll be something that I'll fulfill this year, and then it will also be something that we will need to add to the mayor's list of committees and commissions, because as you can imagine, the high school district and all the school districts need to work closely with the community leaders and all the various public resources to ensure a variety of safety issues related to events on campus, off campus. What do we do with parents? How do we transport students? So it was a little over 2 hours, very informative, very engaged group. I was very proud to be a part of it and happy to share with them that our public resource officer is our SRO is highly regarded, and also that they very much appreciate the fact that the city and the city council recognize that all of the campuses, the valuable cargo that is contained on those sites, the importance of keeping them safe, and the importance of being ready in the event that something tragic were to occur, that we would know how to respond and do our part to help mitigate any issue that might arise on any of the school district campuses in the city. So,
Question, doesn't the police department already kind of do that?
yes, they do. And this is a new mandate from state legislation that was passed apparently last year. It requires an increased level of participation. So we had folks there from the sheriff's department. Our officer was there. Chris Corey was there, and a number of folks from all of the sheriff's department SROs were there, along with the superintendent of schools, and it was a very dynamic group. So I was happy to represent the citizens of Placerville. So thank you for that. Now moving on to item 3.2, the Caltrans update on their Highway 50 Mosquito Road project. And of course, I had the flyer right here, and now I don't have it. I'll see if I can do it by memory. They are continuing to move forward with their Highway 50 Mosquito Bridge project. It is currently set to begin on April 1st and continue for 12 consecutive days, 24 hours a day. They will reduce Highway 50 at Mosquito Bridge to 1 lane in each direction. Both ramps at Mosquito Road will be closed during the duration of this construction. Caltrans is coming back for a follow-up meeting with the community stakeholders on March 25th, which is in just a couple of weeks. They'll be here in this building to review the project status at that time. They have already begun doing their traffic and their SIG alert process. That started on Monday, I want to say. And they will spread the message all the way into the Bay Area that Highway 50 through Placerville will be restricted to 1 lane and with an anticipated travel time of 45 minutes to get through one direction.
Mr. Mayor, I got an email tonight, so they already started.
Good, good. So we're trying to put together all the stakeholders across the community so we can do the best we can. Again, this is a Caltrans project. It's the one that they started last year during the Apple Hill season, and then Mayor Wendy Thomas was so successful in having them pull that plan back off the highway, literally, and reconsider their plan. And they know what they're doing. I would have liked to have seen a little bit more publicity by now, but they're saying no, the public will forget, which they will. I know I'm right there with them. So we will let their communication experts. They had a huge staff here at this last meeting. So just again, be forewarned that we are going to be working our way through this project. If there is a rain delay, that Caltrans is supposed to let us know 5 days before, Cleve? That sound about right?
I think it's a week out.
Yeah, so if they rain delay it, they have the last 12 days in April as their alternative target. So one way or another, in April, we're going to get this project done. So more information to come. So thank you very much for your continued information or interest in this project. It will be interesting to see what happens. That moves us on to item 3.3, a Civic Lab presentation. We have a couple of esteemed former city council members in the audience this evening. Before we proceed to the report, I'd like to ask the city attorney to clarify a concern that was brought up regarding the ability for former council members to address the city council in the form of lobbying for a project. Mr. Driscoll and I had an opportunity to discuss this yesterday, and I asked him to be prepared this evening to share his thoughts with the audience.
Thank you, Mayor Acuna. In the council's handbook and policies, there's a paragraph 17 regarding lobbying, and it basically provides that for 1 year after leaving city service, no official shall attempt to lobby or influence any current officials on matters pending before the city. The paragraph further defines a lobbyist as a person who is paid to try and influence the legislation. My understanding of the presentation tonight is that nobody is being paid to represent any special interest in the presentation that's being made. There's certainly no prohibition against someone who was in city service as an official from coming back and talking to the council about something of their interest to them or to the city generally, as long as they're not being paid by somebody who will benefit from that project. So I don't see any problem with the presentation.
Thank you for that clarification, Mr. Driscoll. Councilmember Borelli?
Weren't they appointed to take on this by Cleve or?
Yeah, I put the group together. It wasn't council appointed, but I
No,
put
we
the group
didn't have
together.
anything to
Right.
do with it.
Correct.
Yeah, I'm just, and that's a good question. So I was just making sure that everybody understands that there are no issues and concerns with the presentation that we are just about to receive. So with that, Mr. Morris, unless you had any further information to share, I'd like to invite our representatives from Civic Lab to come forward and make their presentation. And I understand that Mr. John Clarici will be the lead presenter.
Good evening, Mayor Acuna, City Council. Thank you very much. My name is John Clarici. I'm part of the Civic Lab team for year 2 of Civic Lab, and we have a presentation here. I am not getting paid. I'll just let you know that right off the bat. Okay, revitalizing we'll get into what Civic Lab is. It's always kind of where do you begin with a presentation. We're going to begin at the beginning. And this is about revitalizing Broadway, potentially. Placerville's hidden gem, which we like to call it sometimes. And it's a project for Civic Lab Year 2, just as it says there on the slide. What is Civic Lab? You can read that. It's a regional program sponsored by the Sacramento by SACOG that aims to address issues of regional importance through action at the local level. So like, for example, last year, Civic Lab Year 1, it was focusing on little, they always first and the last, the beginning and the end of a transit trip, for example, or doing micro-transit, or doing anything that was like having to do with mobility, but on a kind of a small scale. The city did not participate in Year 1. I don't think El Dorado County did either. There were a number of really interesting, oh, we did? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, actually, the shuttle up at Apple
that's
Hill
right.
was one of the key projects.
That's
they did
right.
last
I
year.
forgot all about it already. See, this is what happens when you don't do this job anymore. Yes, that's right. The Apple Hill Shuttle was a pilot program that came out of Civic Lab. So there you go, right there, Civic Lab. A great idea. So this year, it was about what you do with old commercial centers that time is kind of forgotten. Maybe trends have changed. People's shopping habits have changed. Traffic patterns, any of a number of things. We know what they are. You can go down Folsom Boulevard. You can go out to Del Paso Heights. You can go to a number of different places and see these kind of older commercials. There's usually these strip centers that were built in the 50s and 60s and 70s that maybe are still occupied but aren't necessarily meeting their full potential. So it's a year-long process with monthly, day-long meetings. And, there's a bunch of resources that get brought to bear. In this case, it's folks like planners and financiers and engineers. And then, of course, you're always working with your fellow groups, because there, I think, are 9 or 10 teams that are working this year. And some of the cities I'll mention here in a bit. And so you talk to your peers amongst the groups that are the other Civic Lab teams. So this is a year-long process, day-long meetings, once a month. And they evolve over time. So, for example, in our first meeting, we had a problem statement or a challenge statement or some euphemism like that. And then we've refined that. We've also then worked on, well, what would our vision be if we could meet our challenge? What tools would we need? And then that starts to sort of bring about the idea of, well, who would you bring to the meetings next? Because the idea is to have them be not just reasons to get together and have lunch, but also to they evolve over time and as the needs of the Civic Lab process move forward. So that's kind of Civic Lab in a nutshell. Here we go. Here's Civic Lab year. Oh, I'm supposed to say year 2. Anyway, Civic Lab year. The focus is on the revitalization, like I said, older commercial areas, especially this one here. One of the things that we wanted to emphasize with Broadway is, when I first moved to Placerville, Broadway, it still is a very vibrant sort of commercial center, different than it was, 40 years ago when I first started coming to town. But it was very vibrant. There were lots of stores. You went there for its essential services. And in some respects, it still fits that need. It hasn't gone like Main Street, which has gone more towards very much more focusing on the tourist components of it. When I first moved to town, Main Street had essential services on it, but they don't really exist there anymore, except for a pharmacy and some dry cleaners and stuff like that. It's more tourist oriented. Broadway, on the other hand, has still kind of got that going, but it's not the center of things as it might have been 20, 30, 40 years ago. So these are these ones that have kind of seen things change. So we're looking at them with the idea of how could they better accommodate a changing commercial marketplace. It's very important to say that. So reinvent themselves to better accommodate a changing commercial marketplace. And of course, when Civic Lab Year 2 was first brought up when I was on the SACOG board, I immediately said, ooh, Broadway. Because when they started to mention sort of the kernel of it and what the idea was, I went, wow, Broadway, and some very specific places on Broadway, but Broadway in general seemed like the perfect candidate, just like it says up there. And then the other cities that are involved, and I couldn't remember them all when I was doing the slide, but that's some of them up there. They go all the way from Ileton, very south part of Sacramento County, all the way up to Loomis and points beyond. So there's a lot of folks involved that are representing not just big cities and big counties, but also small cities and smaller places as well. So it's a fun group. We have a good time, and lots of good ideas come out. This is your Broadway team. Wendy Thomas, Cleve Morris, you also know. Pierre Rivas, you also know. Mickey Kaiserman, you also know as a local businessman. He's a member of your Economic Advisory Committee. I believe he's also on the fire board too now. Way to go. And me, a former thing. But I do own a rental property in town, not a commercial piece of property. So a fine group of people, very energetic. We're all very excited about this, and a lot of good thought, ideas, and processes that have come from this group. They're a dynamic group, and one of the focus of the group is they have the city's best interest at heart, and they certainly want to do something with Broadway. Our objective: explore ways to reimagine, re-engineer, generally improve the commercial and residential climate on Broadway. We will match willing participants. This is not going to be some sort of odious government thing where we kind of go and force people to do things they don't want to do. These will all be willing sellers and buyers, as the phrase usually is, that feel maybe their properties need to be fixed up, improved. They want to do something, but that's the most important thing. This is going to be people that want to do something, and they are private property owners. One of the things that we were looking at, it's all in vogue nowadays, but I think it's also a trend that is important, is this idea of mixed use. So not only is it about doing commercial stuff on Broadway, because commercial is changing a great deal, as we all know, but also potentially providing housing stock, residential housing stock in the mixed use environment. So because we all know there are not a lot of houses here in town to buy, especially for people that don't make a lot of money. Create a sense of place. That's one of the things you hear about more often than anything now. Why do people go shop somewhere? It's not just to do errands. That's very looked at kind of with a frowny face. It's about going someplace and having an experience. So while you're doing your errands, you also may go get a cup of coffee. You may go out to lunch. You may go enjoy something that you weren't thinking about enjoying when you go shopping. Thus, there are places like Palladio now where it's all about experiences. It's the kind of anti-Amazon notion of looking at commercial and the commercial environment. It is not redevelopment. It's very important to say that. There, in fact, is no redevelopment. It couldn't be redevelopment even if we wanted it to be, because there's no way to make it redevelopment. But it's really important to say that over and over again. We are not redevelopment. Okay. And so this is our challenge statement on Broadway. And this took some time. We started off with this, and we've morphed it and done it and massaged it. And as we thought about it more and got more information through the Civic Lab process, it has evolved into this. And I imagine it'll even change after this. Basically, it's just, what can you do with these things? How can you maximize their potential? How can you work on things? What incentives are there? What tools could there be brought to bear? What things can we do to help folks who want to be helped fix up their properties, reimagine them, all of that. Whoa. Okay, I just violated my own rule. There have been 3 Civic Labs to date, and 2 homework assignments. 3 Civic Labs, 2 homework assignments. Thank God for Wendy Thomas. I know everybody thinks that, but I really mean it. Because Wendy takes our things and turns them into really cool stuff, which we hand in, and it makes us look a lot smarter than certainly I am. And it's upside down to show you even more so why I need to have Wendy around. She makes me orient papers to the top of the room. Anyway, so this is it. This is all very important. And for example, this one was about the housing analysis. So what kind of housing is there? All of that. And there's arrows and they point to things, and it's all very good. So homework went up to the corridor analysis. What do we know about it? We actually, Wendy actually did it. She did like an online Facebook, I think, through Facebook? Yeah, a Facebook poll, and people said what I like, what I don't like, what things are good, what things are bad. It was actually very illuminating. It supported a lot of things that we already thought about the corridor. It's actually valuable to people. People do a lot of very basic shopping on Broadway. They like it because there's lots of parking. It's relatively easy to get around in. And there's lots of things to go. There's good, solid stores. There's grocery stores. There's shoe stores. There's all sorts of places. There's other things you can do. There's a McDonald's. So it's nice. So that was the first one. The second one was a housing analysis, and this was really eye-opening. We actually went and talked to Deborah Miller, and she she's a real estate broker here in town. She used to be on the I think she still is on the Economic Advisory Committee. Thank you. She's also the head of the Association of Realtors for El Dorado County. So we went to her to confirm things, because one of the things we wanted to do, far too often in a lot of these situations, and I know it certainly happens in town, everything is somewhat anecdotal. So you say, well, we need this. Well, do we really need it? Well, we went out and actually tried to find out. There's always this idea there's not enough rental housing in town. There's not enough housing for modest income families, younger families, the missing middle, as it's called. But we wanted to ground truth that. So we went and talked to the people that actually sell houses. And it was very good. And so we got a lot of data, and they told us like the average house, how long it stays on the market, where, we kind of mined them to say, well, if you built an attached 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom, 1,100 square foot or 1,400 square foot condo slash townhouse in a mixed-use development, would it sell? Well, she was actually able to show us there are those things in town, and they sell very quickly. If you see some of the things that are multifamily, like over off of Cumbelic, even down the street from us on Jeffrey, those things sell very quickly. They're desirable. So we wanted to establish that there is, in fact, a need for the kinds of housing that might go with the mixed use. So that was it. And then we went to zoning, and we did a bunch of techno stuff that's not really all that interesting. Okay, so what we'd like to do is identify a pilot project that addresses our problem statement and meets our vision statement. Is that next? Okay, anyway. With resources with resources for a pilot project, we would retain professional services to develop a feasibility thing. And so the things that we would be looking for in our help, what we're asking for, the professional services, are things like conceptual drawings, financial analysis, identify financial tools and lending options, a return on investment analysis, which is very important for anybody that's deciding to rehabilitate or refurbish their structure, expand it, make it differently. You want to know how you're going to do with your investment. And creation of a cohesive streetscape plan for the corridor, once again, addressing the sense of place. Now, there's already things happening. There's the sidewalks and all of that that's going on currently that we're going to be built, and they're going to extend up Broadway over time. So some of these things are already in place, but developing more of that sense of place. So that's kind of where we are going, because one of the important parts of Civic Lab is getting those resources. So for example, at our last Civic Lab meeting, we had a financier there. We had someone that was associated, who was the head of the development services for the city of Woodland, who's actually living some of this on the ground. Woodland is actually doing some of these things right now. And then there was a young lady from who's a developer who does development type things, mixed use developments, rather on a large scale, not too many small scale things, but on big things. And she described to her like some of the challenges they have when they deal with a city about how they want to go about it, fees, processes, that sort of thing. So this is what you're doing. This is what's happening in Civic Lab. So eventually, what we would like are these things. The reason that we have some notion that we might get these things is because last year in Civic Lab, after they kind of noodled around with all these different kinds of transit things and other mobility things that they were doing on this small scale stuff, they actually came to the SACOG board and said, would you give us $1 million? $1 million. And the $1 million was then given to these projects so that they could actually go do them. That's why there's an Apple Hill shuttle last summer or fall, was because that was part of Civic Lab. We are hoping that the same thing happens in this. So if we were to get some money, we could actually start to bring these services and these kinds of resources to bear. And not just to focus on Broadway. I'm going to step off of the Civic Lab thing for just a second. We also think that this is potentially things that could be done throughout the city, for example, on Placerville Drive. And we've actually sort of not focused on Placerville Drive, but we've talked about Placerville Drive. You know, there's a lot of potential down there. These same kinds of resources and tools could be brought to bear in other parts of the city, I think, to good use. Because we kind of thought about it. What really stops people from doing anything? Well, they don't have enough money, they don't know, they've never done it before, they don't have kind of a vision. Like if you asked me what something should look like 3 phases out, I wouldn't know. I ask my wife, she does that. But this is how you get that information. So that's what we're looking for. That's kind of the end game. And we're going to be working through the next few meetings to do that, and then ultimately have the big ask of the SACOG board, and maybe they'll do it. I always look to James because, James Corliss is here, by the way. He is the executive director of SACOG, so he's got the money. Okay. All right. Are there any questions before? Well, actually, no. Don't hold your questions. What are the possibilities? Now, I am going to say this with gusto. There's gusto. This is not an endorsement of any kind of architectural style. This is not an endorsement of any particular kind of way something should look. Far too often, things get shown to you, and then it ends up out there in the blogosphere that look at all the stupid things that people want to do. These are just pictures, mostly to show you what things can do, but mostly this is actually a tool. What we're going to be looking at in these next few frames is a tool that I think would be incredibly valuable if you're trying to do something on Broadway or anywhere else in Placerville in terms of development, showing people what the possibilities are. We are making no comment about architecture at this point. All right, so what are the possibilities? Pictures that say 1,000 words. Anybody that's driven on Elm to get onto Highway 49 in Auburn before you head down into the canyon has probably been through this intersection. So this is what it looks like presently if you're kind of standing on the sidewalk on top of a car, and that's what it looks like. Whoa, look at that. Okay, so you've got that. You've got some treatments. You obviously some different buildings, some multi-story things. I'm assuming those things in those second and third floors are actually apartments. Down on the first level, you've got some kind of either commercial or other kind of use that would bring people there, sense of place, once again. So you have that.
What did you do with the water wheel?
I think, we moved it to a very appropriate, I didn't personally do anything with it.
I'm teasing, I love that water wheel.
But the water wheel will be taken to a place where it can be culturally appreciated by the people who value water wheels. I guarantee you, there was never a water wheel in that place, ever, except for when they put it there. Okay, so, but you see, so then the next thing is, not only do we have the buildings and all these people, but we now have treatments on the street, we have crosswalks, we have lights. This is just a face. So if you go back, just to show you, that's what it looks like today. Bye-bye water wheel. Hello, nice sidewalks. And look at all those happy people. And there's plenty of happy people in those apartments or whatever. A lot of happiness. And they saved the big trees. Look at that. There's still those 2 redwood trees there in the far background. So we didn't even tear down trees. Very important. This is Live Oak Boulevard. And I've probably been there. This is how unremarkable it is. I can't even remember having actually been down Live Oak Boulevard in Live Oak. But this is what it looks like. There's a guy there with a bag. He's very important. So that's what it looks like today. That is a streetscape. Man with bag is still there, but he's much happier because he's standing on a sidewalk and not out in the middle of the road. And there's some road treatments, and they've gussied up the lights a little bit. But those are all those are all still the same buildings there. So those are the same buildings, but just with some streetscaping. Listen, that lovely man with bag. He has a friend now that's coming across the street who wasn't there before. And then now that's, a nice building there. There's some other treatments that were done across the street there. You're starting to see some addition of some buildings and some commercial development, some upgrading to it. And then finally, wow, look at that. There's even more people. The man with the bag is still there waiting to cross the street, but he now has friends. They're building on this side. The commercial development is really happening. Like I said, whether or not you want your town to look like that or whatever, that's a matter of architecture. That's a matter of the private property owner deciding what the heck or she wants his or her building to look like. These are just examples, but more importantly is the tool. If you're sitting here as a property owner, you may not never get to the third frame because you can't, not that you're not smart enough or anything, but you just can't think about it. But if someone says, by the way, if you own that building kind of to the man's left there, all of a sudden, wow, look at that. And if that's what you want to do, I mean, no one's going to hold a gun to your head. But this is a tool. This is a really powerful tool, I think. So anyway, this is Civic Lab. I believe that's it for Live Oak Boulevard. Do any of my compatriots want to add any kind of clarity or less rambly sort of discussion? Okay, great. Anyway, that's it. Do you have any questions?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for the presentation and the update on the steps that you have taken so far
Yes.
on the behalf of Broadway, because that's really what it's all about, trying to take that same space and put it back to better use in 2019. Questions from the council? Councilmember Pirelli.
I do. A long time ago, Broadway, we had a multimodal. Is that being brought into this? And then also, I'll give you 2. The commission that we had to look for economic development. Remember what was the name of that study? The guy who did that study for us, and they came back with possible businesses and stuff that could. HDL. Okay.
Yes.
Are either one of those considered?
We have used to great advantage the first one that you talked about in terms of the mobility studies and stuff, because even though there weren't, it wasn't really designed to do like streetscaping and stuff. There were some ideas in there, and they did sort of have some layouts and things. So that has definitely been part of it. I don't think the second thing, no. I'm getting people shaking their heads, so no.
Good to know that you're using the other information, though.
It's
Karen, did you have any
good.
questions on the presentation?
Sure. Do you have have you spoken to any landowners that would be interested in kind of stepping up to the plate and taking the first steps?
Good question.
Is a tremendous question. We are having a meeting on Thursday. This coming Thursday, we're having a meeting here, and we have invited property owners. We'll see who shows up. to talk about this, because as we've said, this is about willing participants. And so that's the first step. My guess is we may have to kind of approach them several times before we get the kind of a critical mass of interest, but we don't know. But yes, so and I'm assuming it starts at 6. Everything starts at 6, right? There you go.
And then kind of a
Believe?
follow-up question to that.
Okay.
The funding that may hopefully be available from SACOG, would that be in the form of like a loan to the property owners, or?
No, the kinds of money that we're talking about probably for the property owners themselves to do anything are going to be far more than whatever they're likely to pony up. But it's a good question, because there's actually a little adjunct, and I'll try to get through it really quickly. To answer your question directly, though, no. The money that we would receive would be to develop these tools and make this information available to folks. And there's already some things percolating. The gal from Portland State, name? Yeah, I don't remember it either. But she's been around. She's really good, even though I can't remember her name. And she's very helpful. In fact, she did a lot of work in Winters and Woodland, helping them with doing stuff with their storefronts. She's very energetic, and she's really good. We actually maybe have access to her already to do some like workshops and stuff in the corridor. No, we're talking more about bringing just somebody to put that slideshow together, except it would be Broadway and not Live Oak. Okay? Okay.
Thank you.
Good questions. All right. Councilmember Thomas? All right. Vice Mayor Saragosa.
Thank you, John. What's sort of the I know, so we have Thursday. What's sort of the next steps after that as this moves forward?
It's an iterative process. So we obviously need to, in the Civic Lab portion, we are going to be refining that information gathering and also kind of refining our bits. You know, it started off with a challenge statement, then a vision statement, and then, getting some of these people to come in to do that. My guess is we'll probably get more into the development side of things, and so we'll really be talking to folks that do this. My understanding is that at some point we would like to maybe get property owners and developers, like speed dating sort of thing, but with property owners and developers, to actually talk to each other about this and that sort of thing. So the next steps with that, specifically with the property owners here in town, we're going to find out a lot on Thursday. And then that'll really dictate, I think, what we go after that. But my guess is that we'll if we really strike gold, we'll find a few people who go, I've always wanted to do this and I've never known how. Thank God you're here and now help me go where I need to go. Or we'll hopefully just get some interest, but that's kind of the next step. So it's a little vague because it is an iterative process and you don't want to guess too far in the future. Okay.
Any other question? Thank you very much, John. I would just...
Hold on. There is one thing.
Okay.
Because it's kind of related to the question that Councilmember Taylor asked. There is this thing called Green Means Go. And without boring you to tears, which I probably have done already, without doing it more, Green Means Go is a response to the Air Board requiring air quality conformity as part of passing the Metropolitan Transportation Plan and all of that. And in order to get that all done and blessed so that you can actually go out and do things, you have to have an air quality conformity that's based on 2005, and then they have thresholds. So when it was done 4 years ago, the threshold was 16%. This year it's 19%. Now that is a lot, actually. It's even a percentage. It's like a 20-something% increase. It's also getting away from the low-hanging fruit. Before, when we were able to do these things, you could kind of go, well, there's going to be so many electric cars, and we can change all the buses to natural gas, and we can do these things. It's getting now where there's less fat and more meat and bone, and so the 19% is a real challenge for this region especially. And no fault of the region, it's just more geography and climate that is a problem. So the good folks at SACOG, as smart as they are, came up with this idea of Green Means Go, which is kind of a pilot program to go around, and James could probably describe it better, but...
Yes, that's coming
Oh,
up.
really?
That's coming up later, Mr.
Oh,
President.
Jiminy Christmas, you should have stopped me.
You were on a roll.
My wife
but
just
You were
stops
going- you were-
listening
you were-
after a while.
I
You
know
guys
well.
should have just... Okay.
But you could.
Anyway,
you're
Green
welcome
Means
to
Go is
say.
very important, and James will tell you all about it here momentarily. But that's potentially where the real money is.
Right.
And that's what's important. And staff is working on putting together the thing. They probably did that already. So anyway,
No, you're not. We're almost done. I have a question. When do you anticipate having another report that you can come and share with the council and the community?
Yeah, I think quarterly, another three,
Quarterly?
because we've done this now, Mark, this will be the third month. Yeah, probably in about 3 months.
Right, well, this
We'll
was
let you know if something crazy happens and we need to come back and talk to you.
we certainly appreciate it. And seriously,
Yes.
I think that would be very appropriate. I appreciate
Yeah.
the update on what's going on.
Right.
I think we all realize that Broadway is an area that there's the positive and the negative, and there are so many. The community has a huge investment in infrastructure up there, and over time, as you described in the process, the state of retail is not reflected on all of the areas of Broadway, and there are issues with some out-of-town owners also. We can't afford to just let that sit fallow anymore and just say, oh, well, maybe some other day. So this is an awesome opportunity to see that street revitalized by the actual private property owners with the types of buildings and what have you that they and the community select at the schedule that they choose. So thank you very much for your dedication to this. It sounds like fun. You don't have to. So go out there and do it.
You do get lunch.
You do get lunch,
Which is really
which
important.
is important.
But it is
So-
fun. It is fun because there's a lot of people in the room, and the SACOG staff is remarkable. I mean, they are a really good crowd, and they bring a lot of passion and expertise to this thing. And I think, as I mentioned to James, rather than having them chase the conformity model all over the region and trying to figure out how you get that last little widgety thing so that you can get the airport off your rear end, I think Green Means Go is like one of the highest and best uses for staff down there, because that is creative, it's forward thinking, and it's really, I think, a good use of their expertise. And so I'm excited by it. It's going to be a big thing, and James will talk about it eventually. But I think that's the cool thing. I think that's a really cool prospect. And Civic Lab is also very neat.
Thank you very much. We'll see you in 3 months.
I will see you.
Maybe sooner
I
with
will
an
s-
exciting new project. All right. That was an informational presentation to the council, and we certainly appreciate all the members involved in the committee and SACOG's participation to help make this possible. Move on to item 4 this evening, closed session report. I'll ask the city attorney if he has anything to report this evening.
I do, Mr. Mayor. Tonight in closed session, the council rejected the claim of Mark and Gina Hale with a unanimous 5-0 vote. There was no other reportable action taken, though.
Thank you very much, Mr. Driscoll. I'm sure the record will reflect that. Next up is item 5, adoption of the agenda. It had occurred to me, depending on who was in our audience other than Mr. Clarici this evening, item 12.5, which deals with the Historic City Hall building. Most of the other items under, we have 12.1, which we will get to in its place with our representative from SACOG, but would the council consider moving 12.5 up to be heard before the other items, which are pretty much administrative things?
I'll move that we move 12.5 to right after 12.1 and adopt the agenda.
Has it been moved and seconded? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right, so the agenda is adopted with that modification. Item 12.5 will be heard after item 12.1. All right. Moving on to ceremonial matters, we have none this evening, although having Mr. Clarici in the house is somewhat similar to that. Moving on to public comments. Do we have any written communication this evening, Mr. Morris? Thank you very much. This is a part of the meeting where the public is invited to address the city council on items that are not on this evening's agenda. We do ask that you conduct yourself in a respectful manner and restrict your comments to issues that are pertinent to matters before the city council. Is there anyone wishing to address the council on a non-agendized item this evening? Seeing one person approaching the podium.
Sue Rodman, Placerville resident.
evening,
I would
Sue.
like to know how our veg management ordinance is coming along. If we're going to get it out in time for people to actually accomplish some work this year. Since the rain has mostly stopped, now is the time.
All right,
So,
let's see if we can get an answer for you. Thank you, Sue. Is there anyone else that wishes to address the council on a non-agendized item?
Good evening. Mayor Kuna and members of the council.
Could you pull the microphone up?
Sure.
Thank you very much, Kirk.
The couple of questions I had relate to items that are on it, but not substantively, and that is the idea that the agendas come out very late. This one came out to us on Friday. I know I was at a meeting of business people on Main Street Thursday night and asked a representative from the city what was on the agenda, what might we see. It might have been my hearing, but nobody else at that group remembers the City Hall, old City Hall buildings being mentioned, that was going to be raised. And I'm also didn't get clear about how you've got a new team in office, and you've got a new member who represents the city on CCOG. And then we have this group. How did I'm not sure if you could just help me, anything was explained about how this group that we just heard from for a half hour came about. Was this appointed by the chair? Because I don't, by the city manager? Because I don't remember it being, something the city council had discussed before. I may be mistaken. I think that'd be helpful to fill that in. Thank you.
You're welcome. Let's see if we can get that answered also. Anyone else wishing to address the council on non-agendized item? Seeing no one else approaching the podium, I will close public comment, and I will ask city manager to, if we could, do we have an answer for Sue's question regarding how we're doing on our ordinance?
Sure. We have a couple of people are meeting to work on that again next week. We hope to have a draft coming back to the council at your next meeting.
Oh, very good.
Review.
So March 20-something. All right, and then Mr. Smith's questions are regarding to posting of the agenda and then the creation of the Civic Lab.
Yep. Posting of the agenda, yes, it was on Friday that it was posted. When I reported to, I was the one that was at PDA meeting on Thursday night, and I did not bring up, that was a late addition item, the old City Hall item. However, after I got home on Thursday night after the PDA meeting, I did send a message to their staff person, Heidi Meyerhofer, asked her to report to the PDA committee that this would be on the agenda. She assured me she would send that information out to PDA. Civic Lab, that was something that was sent to me by SACOG. I believe our representative was probably already aware of it also, but I set up the group. I put the group together to attend and participate in those. So I have not asked for council if you want me to do that or not. It's something that we took on a staff level. Myself and Priya Rivas have taken that on and moved it forward.
So it was something that was, Civic Lab was created by the city manager.
Correct.
Seems, all right, so very good. We have those questions answered, and you did reach out to the PDA representative to let them know that there was an addition to that item. All right. Thank you, Cleve. Appreciate it. Moving on to consent calendar. All items will be considered under one motion unless a city council member wishes to have one removed for further discussion. Are there any questions on this evening's consent calendar items?
I think I'm going to pull 8.5 just for clarification,
All right, Paul.
because it does affect a lot of folks
right.
that might be
Very
interested
good.
in hearing about it.
And 8.5 is the resolution regarding the banner reservation.
Correct.
All right. Are there any other comments or items to pull? Is there any member of the public that wishes to address the council on any of the consent calendar items before we move forward? Good evening again, Sue.
Good evening, Sue Rodman. I'm wondering about 8.6. It says housing element report. And I'd just like to know, are we meeting the goals from the state, and will this satisfy their requirements for us?
Sue's referring to the report from our planning department regarding our state housing numbers. And, I'll go ahead and pull that. I think I pulled that last time. And we've gone ahead and followed the state's format. So with that, is there a motion to approve the balance of the consent calendar?
I'll move that we approve the balance of the consent calendar and pull item 8.5 and 8.6.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much, Dennis. Moving on to the items pulled from the consent calendar, we'll begin first with item 8.5, which is the banner increase in the banner reservation fee. And Mr. Lishman prepared that Staff report. Patty, did you have a specific question?
No, I just
or-
thought the public should probably hear about it, because there's an awful lot of people that use, might be.
Matt, could I ask you to briefly go over the staff report on 8.5, please?
Yes, thank you, Mayor, members of the council. So item 8.5 is to adopt a resolution approving a banner reservation fee of $100 for the reservation and placement of the promotional banner, across Main Street. Currently, the banner fee is $80 for the week, and we are paying $82.50 to the company to have it hung. And they have recently notified us that effective July 1st, they will be increasing their fee to $92.50. In addition to that, we have 2 or 3 times a year where we need to have the sign company come out with their cranes and do some repairs to the cables. Sometimes they have to have 2 trucks to hang a banner because there's, the wind tangled it up and whatnot. So that's where the additional $750 per banner fee comes into play to help offset some of those unforeseen added expenses. So we feel comfortably that with the new $100 fee that we will be able to cover all of our costs, and we don't anticipate a whole lot of pushback from the folks that use the banner. So hopefully that helps explain it.
Thank you, Matt. Patty, did you have anything?
Right, and I don't think a lot of people realize that we have to hire that to be done. And, I mean, they think the city guys get up there, and it is expensive when you start, hiring companies, so.
Did you have a comment?
Yeah, we used to do it off the porch.
I
in the
remember.
City Hall, but the porch is no longer there.
Porch fell off.
We need a guy with a big ladder.
Exactly.
There's a little missing porch issue, but all right. If there are any other questions on this item, is there any member of the public that wishes to address the council on this item? Is there a motion for approval?
I'll move for approval.
Second.
Been moved by Councilmember Burley, seconded by Councilmember Taylor. All those in favor? Oh, there's money involved. Do you want me to?
Roll call.
Roll call vote, please.
Mayor Acuna?
Aye.
Councilmember Borelli?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Saragosa?
Aye.
Councilmember Taylor?
Aye.
Councilmember Thomas?
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you very much, Patty, for bringing that up, highlighting that for the public. And then I think I went ahead and pulled 8.6. Again, and I appreciate Sue Rodman's comments on this. This was a highly critical and important thing for us to be making sure that we are in compliance with. This is the staff's latest update using what I believe was a revised form. Mr. Rivas, did you want to just do a brief summary on what we are reporting here in 8.6 this evening?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. State law requires that each city and county prepare an annual report on the status and implementation of their respective housing element each year by April 1st. So the annual report is required to be submitted to the City Council for the receive and file, and to the Governor's Office of Planning and Research, OPR, and to the Department of Housing and Community Development, HCD. We did present also to the Planning Commission at their March 5th, 2019 meeting. The Planning Commission did pull the item, and there was some considerable discussion about what the numbers meant and how to read the report. The report is not a pass-fail. Basically, the report is a snapshot of the last year of the housing element. The current housing element is cycle 5, which is for 2013 through 2021. It was adopted back on February 11th of 2014 by the council, and it's been amended numerous times as reported in the staff report, mainly by the creation of a housing opportunity overlay and other modifications that we made to the housing element in order to comply with state law with respect to secondary residential units, now referred to as accessory dwelling units or ADUs. We are in full compliance with state housing law. To answer more directly to the speaker's question, are we meeting our goals? And the main goal then of the housing element is to provide for range of housing to meet all income ranges. So, very low, moderate, above moderate. As you can see in the report, we've been meeting a lot of housing units to comply with providing for moderate and above moderate housing, for moderate and above moderate income. We have not created any new units that could be attributed to low and very low, which is what we'd like to do. But it's important to point out that the city is not mandated to construct housing for low and very low, though we try and do that through a lot of different programs, such as density bonus or other means. But essentially, the city is not required to, basically provide its own program, fund affordable housing. We just have to provide for it through the planning process, so that we make sure that we have an inventory of property that would be available for construction of units at a density that should theoretically achieve affordable housing, and that's 20 units per acre. Some of you probably remember the very involved process we went to create a housing opportunity overlay zone that allows for a 20 unit per acre or greater density on certain lands that we so zoned in the city. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you have about this report. I do want to point out, I think the mayor did point out, we had agendized this report to you, I think back in January, and then lo and behold, we find out from the state that they modified the form after the fact. And so we went ahead and if you have a copy of that form, or if you recall looking at that form, it is nowhere near the detail that now the state requires. They're really drilling down on the units that are built. They want to know, how many units, are they single family, are they multifamily, when was the permit issued, were they finalized? A lot of statistical information that is provided to the state in regards to the housing units that were built in the previous year. And then you look at the housing element progress report, the second section, which is contained in your staff report there. That's where we identify all the different programs in our housing element and the status of those programs.
Does that conclude your report?
And that concludes my report. I'll be happy to answer any questions the council
Pierre, I
has at
appreciate
time.
this, and as we predicted, the state took the form and added many pages to it. And because of the nature of this particular requirement and the level of scrutiny that it receives, and I don't mean this to sound silly, but this is just kind of how this works, there are some of these pages that are left blank because we know that we didn't have any of that type of activity. Would the state recognize that as no activity, or would the state recognize that as a form not completed? For example, I have the annual element progress report, housing elements, sites identified or rezoned to accommodate shortfall housing need. It's in attachment A. I don't know that I have a page number on it. And there is no entry there because there's been no activity. Does the state understand that that is a zero, or will they at some point in the future audit that and say, well, your planning staff didn't fill that out correctly?
The answer would be no. As I mentioned earlier in my presentation, our housing element is in full compliance with state housing law. So we have rezoned. We went through that effort back in, I believe, that finalized in 2017 or 2016. So that would not reflect then on this annual report. It would have reflected on previous reports. But the state was very concerned that as we went through that exercise of rezoning property, that we did have an inventory sufficient to meet our RENA number for the Cycle 5 housing element. And we have an inventory sufficient to meet our RENA number for the Cycles 5.
I'm just sort of playing devil's advocate with, once this report gets submitted, in places where we know we didn't enter anything, we meant it to be blank, just make sure that the state accepts it as a completed review. So if you're confident with it, that's fine. Is there any questions from the council on 8.6? I think we've heard from our public on 8.6. Is there a motion to approve?
I'll move to approve it.
Second?
Moved and seconded. All those in favor? Aye. Thank you again, Mr. Rivas. This is extremely important to our community. Keeps us out of the spotlight. All right, moving on, that completes our consent calendar items, so we'll move on to item 9. We just did that. 10, there are no ordinances, there are no public hearings this evening, which brings us to item 12.1, to adopt a resolution acknowledging the city of Placerville is committed to helping the state of California and the SACOG region reach its 19% greenhouse gas reduction. Who has the staff report on this?
Yeah.
Mr. Rivas.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. You have your staff report. You also have attached to that is the flyer. It's the Green Means Go flyer that's been provided by SACOG. We have that in there as well for your information. And then we have the resolution that we're requesting that the council adopt. And basically the resolution is to just support what the state of California and the Sacramento Area of Council of Governments is trying to reach its goal of a 19% greenhouse gas reduction through the implementation of the Green Means Go pilot project. And basically, Green Means Go, and I'm just going to go ahead and read from the flyer because it's very, very concise. Green Means Go is a multi-year pilot program to lower greenhouse gas emissions in the 6-county Sacramento region by accelerating infill development, reducing vehicle trips, and electrifying remaining trips. Local jurisdictions will designate green zones in which they must take specific actions to promote infill development and reduce existing barriers and provide new transportation options. State funding is needed to help implement these actions and further incentivize local development and housing production. And again, housing production, I want to emphasize that because that again ties into our housing element and hopefully better meet our housing goals. Green zones, in a partnership of state funding and local government action, create areas targeted for infill, compact development, increasing housing and transportation options, and promoting shorter, fewer, and cleaner vehicle trips. And again, the 19%, as I think former council member John Clerici mentioned, it's a 2005 base year. The CARB, the California Air Resources Board, is looking at having us reduce our greenhouse gases by 19% to 2035. And that, of course, this is sort of an implementation measure out of the Metropolitan Transportation Plan / Sustainable Community Strategy. This is a direct program out of that in order to meet that. The time horizon for the MTP is 2040. So basically, we would be utilizing, or what staff has been doing is, and it's been nicely, things are sort of aligned, if you will, the Civic Lab 2 program for the Broadway. We've identified a number of, and I use the word, and I'm going to use the word because we use it a lot in our team, and that's tired, and that's not to be offensive to any of the property owners, but just you're looking at commercial development that dates back, some of them, 1960s, and a lot of commercial strips are antiquated. They're competing with e-commerce. And so, as Mr. Clerici pointed out, there's this whole effort to try and revitalize this commercial. Well, I think the Green Means Go goes a little bit step further. Mr. Clerici did mention mixed use. And mixed use, we're looking at vertically oriented mixed use where you have commercial retail on the first floor, and then the upper floors you have residential. And that, of course, meets all the goals of trying to place the workers or people right next to where they work. It reduces vehicle miles traveled, and hopefully in turn would then improve on our air quality goals that we're trying to meet. So with that, in fact, I understand that Mr. James Corliss, he's the executive director of the Sacramento Area Council of Governments, is here to speak on this issue. And that concludes my report. I'll turn it over to Mr. Corliss at this time.
Good evening, Mr. Corliss. Welcome to Placerville.
Good evening.
Nice to see you this evening.
Pleasure to be here. I'm not sure I can do any better than Mr. Clerici and Mr. Rivas. But anyway, it really is. It's a pleasure to be up here. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and council members. For participating in the Civic Lab program that we're very proud of. We actually have 13 teams from five of our 6 counties that are tackling very similar issues on these commercial corridors. And then, of course, for this item, which is related, I believe, around Green Means Go. Just maybe to reemphasize a couple of points that were made, but also I think to give you, I've been on my tenure is just about come up on 2 years at SACOG as executive director, And I feel very strongly that we, as a region, need to be much more active in the state legislature. We need to make our case known. We need to make our challenges known. When the Air Resources Board gave us a 19% reduction target, they gave the same target to the San Francisco Bay Area, Los Angeles, and San Diego. And so it isn't that we did not agree with the goals of reducing greenhouse gas emissions, but we said this is actually, we feel a little unfair. We have a more challenging area here. We have more challenging economics. We don't have the same built-out mass transit system those regions do. So if you want us to achieve this target, we want to do that in partnership with you. You have to help us get there. And the state said, can you define exactly what that would look like? And that was a challenge, and if you will, a gauntlet thrown down to us. And so we developed this pilot program called Green Means Go. Again, Mr. Rivas did it very well. 3 buckets. Providing incentives for infill development, mixed-use development, where we can shorten vehicle trips and get people to live close to where they work and shop and everything else. Innovative forms of new public transit. Microtransit, the Apple Hill Shuttle, that first year of Civic Lab you heard about. We want to be, and the 6-county region to be really a test bed to try a lot of new innovative forms of public transit, including even, by the way, teleworking and telecommuting, the fastest growing mode share of not driving alone to work nationally and within our region is actually telecommuting, very good for the environment. And then finally, really accelerating electric vehicle deployment, EVs, which I will tell you, your county stands out as some of the highest share of electric vehicle usage in the 6 counties in the state. We're working with your air district to actually provide some incentives potentially through that. I want to be very clear. We're asking you to adopt this resolution and to even put a pre-application in on Friday. And again, thank you for your staff. There is no funding yet, so we're doing this kind of in reverse. We're trying to show the state the aspirations of all the local governments around this region in order to get the state to help support us financially. That's the deal. So, but we do believe we're going to need places like Placerville to step up to endorse this and to basically give you our vision, give the state your vision, and would be happy to answer any of their questions. Pre-applications due on Friday. We are making a budget request through the budget. We actually have Senator Penn and Assemblymember Cooley making that budget request. We're now trying to get our entire regional delegation to sign on to a support letter. So this is a budget request, and it will play out through the budget cycle through June. So we will know if we're successful or not through June. If we are, we'll be back with more details. Thanks very much again for
Thank you very much. Are there any questions for Mr. Corliss? Before I had one, but I'll let my colleagues go. Michael?
Can you, thanks again for coming out here today and talking a little bit more about Green Means Go. Can you give us a little bit more information in terms of the allocation of the dollars? So we know there's a finite source of dollars. But can you maybe explain to the council and public a little bit more about where those dollars would come from in order to fund the project?
Sure. It's a state budget request. We're largely trying to get the greenhouse gas GGRF reduction fund allocation from that pot of money, cap and trade. If we got any kind of funding, we would then look at criteria for the program. And again, it's in those 3 buckets. Infill development, innovative transit, and accelerating electric vehicle deployment. We would have criteria. And I think what we, and frankly the state, would want to see is what are the quick, on-the-ground, catalytic projects that are out there. I don't know the Broadway. I'm thrilled that your team is working on Broadway, but I do know a lot of other situations around the region where sometimes wastewater, water, sewer infrastructure is a hindrance, right? It's hard to put on one development or one developer, but if we can actually underwrite some of those costs and see those projects advance, and we can get sticks in the ground quickly, those are the kinds of projects we'd be looking for. So or if you're doing an electric vehicle deployment, we'd be looking for something to get up and actually showcased within 3 to 6 months. I think we want the go of Green Means Go means quick. I know you all knew that, but it's just want to play on the words there, but it is really about trying to accelerate these things. We're looking for a 4-year effort around the region. This would be the first year. If we could be so lucky to get all 4 years in one funding slug, that would be fantastic, but we think we're going to have to keep going back for more. But it would be a grant application, and we do our best to make this as simple and as unbureaucratic as possible.
Thank you. And I just want to underscore what he's saying here. I mean, we're going to be in competition with other areas on some of this. I think it's vitally important that we do speak as sort of one voice for this region, because we are at a disadvantage between fighting with San Francisco and the Bay Area and Los Angeles, and so we are sort of in a unique position. And so to the extent that as this sort of 6-county region, it's very important that we do that and be able to go across the street at the Capitol and be able to lobby as a unified voice is incredibly important. So thank you for taking on that project. I know I'll be there across the street doing that as well, but I just wanted to underscore that one voice for all of us to be there together on this issue, because it will benefit everybody as we move forward on this.
Thank you, Michael. Dennis, did you have a question?
I do. By turning in an application this Friday, have we identified, is this SACOG is turning it in, or the city of Placerville?
City of Placerville.
So have we identified projects? Is that a requirement of turning in an application to identify these, lack of better words, shovel-ready projects or shelf-ready projects?
I turn that to staff, but I would just tell you, we're calling it a pre-application because what we're really trying to do is get a signal of your intent and your aspirations. So it's not a full-on, full-blown application. It's a sample of the kinds of things. I've already been in the state capitol many days talking to folks about this, and their first question is, so give me an example. What would people do? And the more that we can have some examples, the more that I can say, well, hey, we could deploy 20 electric vehicles within 2 months in this city. I can actually get a 40-unit multi-family building done in this jurisdiction. The more I can say that, the better. But I would leave it to staff in terms of, you don't have to be specific. The more specific you can be would be really helpful in our quest to obtain these dollars from the state.
Mr. Mayor, I would just add to what Mr. Corliss said. Staff is trying to identify some specific sites in order to have specific projects. A lot of them are different. It'll be a little different strategy in trying to meet these goals. An example would be some of the properties that the Civic Lab 2 has looked at. For example, there was discussion about the Caltrans yard. That is right there off of Blair and Broadway, and that's be a wonderful commercial site where we could have mixed-use development and have affordable housing. So how do we incentivize to get Caltrans to look at another alternative site that may be more advantageous for them to have their yard rather than in Placerville? We're also looking at a number of those older commercial strips that we talked about. How can we then incentivize and try and work with the property owner then to reinvest into their property, and maybe can we then look at adding some mixed use to those developments? And some other properties we're looking at in the city as well. Like I say, staff is open if anybody has any great ideas. But I think we've talked a lot about some of the old industrial sites that exist on Placerville Drive. Now that's prime commercial real estate that are being very much underutilized. And I'll give the Suburban Propane example, and then the adjoining property. That is flat. There is water and sewer available, though there is a constraint about infrastructure. Recently found out that they're on a septic tank. Didn't realize that. But anyways, the sewer's on the other side of Placerville Drive, so that's quite a bit of funding to be able to bring sewer right up to the property. So that is one of the aspects. But one of the technical questions is, how do we incentivize a industrial use? The propane company probably owns the property outright. How can we then assist them in moving maybe out of the city to an industrial park in a more suitable location, so that that property can then be redeveloped into a mixed-use development right there on Placerville Drive? You have, we're putting in bike lanes there. The employment centers are there. And so I think that meets a lot of the goals here that we're trying to achieve through the Greens Means Go. So to answer your question, we are looking at properties that we want to submit as part of this. The main issue that we've been having is how do we come up with a cost estimate when we're really far from coming up with a cost estimate, so they can be extremely rough numbers. We have been working with SACOG staff, they understand that, but we are, intent on getting our application in by Friday.
Thank you very much.
That's great news. All right. Any other questions? All right. Thank you, Mr. Corliss. I'm going to open this up to the public and let them have an opportunity to talk to the item. We certainly appreciate you coming this evening and for all your work that you do at SACOG on our behalf. Is there any member of the public that wishes to address the council on item 12.1?
Sue Rodman, aren't you lucky that I'm retired and can dig into this stuff on my computer at home? I have some questions. Green Means Go sounds great, but how much of Placerville's greenhouse gases are produced by Highway 50 traffic? 19% is a big reduction. That's almost a fifth. And what would be the penalties for non-attainment? One of the emphasis points is higher density housing, and that means you put more people in a smaller area. We need a pretty careful evaluation for fire safety and evacuation. Has this been done into this plan? Placerville hasn't built any high-density apartments for quite a few years, and how do we expect to change that to make this happen? But one of my main concerns is, okay, if we're going to put more people in a smaller area, we need to be able to get them out. If we have a disaster, if we have a fire, they need to be able to get out. And we saw when PG&E cut our power just how bad Highway 50 can back up and make it impossible to get anywhere in the city, and let alone out of it. So those are my questions.
Thank you, Sue. Any other member of the public wish to address the council on this?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Wendy Thomas. I'm delighted to be here with you tonight. I am wearing my Green Means Go jacket, and just wanted to say that as part of the Civic Lab team, when we heard about this project, it was very intriguing, and it's so easy to hear about projects from the state of California and to look at them with alarm and concern, because often big state programs are more onerous to us in a rural California than they are a help. However, digging into this program, we saw potential. And it's so important for us as we look ahead to the sustainability and the viability of our city moving into the future to look at ways to think outside the box. We have to reinvent these old commercial corridors. We have to help property owners, which are often, mom and pop businesses that are passed down from generation to generation. Those folks don't have the tools and the knowledge on what to do. It's a big task. It's a heavy lift, and it's expensive, and it doesn't pencil out with the lease rates that folks are able to get in town. So we need some extra help here. And with the focus from the state on this, we have a strong potential these next 3 or 4 years to get a sizable amount of funding to help with projects that make sense in our city. We already have walkable communities in Placerville. I love that. Broadway and Placerville Drive, with our sidewalks that are coming online, we have a walkable community. Infill is a way to reinvent those tired properties that desperately need it. And, we talk about apartment buildings and more people. However, what we're really talking about is new creative housing that gets us back to our roots. Placerville used to be mixed use. In the gold rush days, we had mixed use development. Folks lived upstairs and then they went downstairs, whether it was the bar or the dry goods store, and they worked downstairs. That's what we're talking about. Because as cities move forward, retail is changing, it's totally different, and folks are going to be looking for ways to live where they work, talking about expanding broadband. And so when we talk about live work, we're not talking about living upstairs, going to commute somewhere else. Maybe it's, virtual office space downstairs. And let's think outside the box and utilize this potential funding source to move Placerville forward. And so it has great potential. Thank you for supporting it. And we're at Civic Lab team real excited about seeing how we can use this tool in ways that work for our city. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Wendy. Any other member of the public wishing to address the council? Seeing no one else, I see Kathy Lishman getting up. Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor Acuna and members of the council. This is a very interesting concept, and I only found out about what was going on here when I looked at the agenda. But it's something that's been talked about for such a long time, and it almost seemed like it was going to be hopeless. And now there's hope to bring a new way of visioning the community. And I was I was sitting at home looking at the meeting on my computer when I heard you were moving item 12.5 up, so I ran down here. But I heard the presentation that they had, and I saw the photos that John presented. And I actually had worked on the housing element on the county's general plan a few years ago. And Noah, I can't even remember his last name, he and I were the ones that talked about inclusionary zoning, and we talked about mixed use, and nobody wanted to have anything to do with it. Now, hopefully, it's becoming very contagious. I know one of the things that keeping a sense of place in Placerville, keeping it a walking community, keeping that sense of community is so important that people sometimes are afraid we're going to lose that. And the city would be the ones that would lead the way on design too. You can build places, low-income places, that are wonderful communities for people to live in, or you can just build them when they're all on top of each other. And so I think there are options down the road that the city is going to be able to create in this, and it just is a very exciting opportunity. And I know I've been dreaming about something like this for a really long time. Thanks.
Thank you, Kathy. Appreciate you coming down this evening. Any other member of the public wishing to address the council on this item? Seeing no one, I'll close public comment and bring this back to the council for comments and action. First of all, any other questions or comments for staff?
I was just going to make a comment, I think back to Sue's question on the 19%. So it wouldn't be 19% for City of Placerville. It's a regional goal. I think El Dorado County is like 3%, 3 or 5, I forget, but it's a smaller amount of the overall. But we have to do our part as well in order to reach the 19%, because it's a very, very, very tough number to hit, 19%, and it's going to take everybody to do it. And things that we could potentially lose could be transit funding. I mean, we stand to potentially lose a lot if we don't hit our goals down the road in terms of funding back into our communities. So it's something we have to take seriously, and it's something that isn't going to go anywhere else. So just a couple of comments.
Dennis? Thank you. Patty? Kara?
I just have a quick comment.
Sure.
I think that this is a very exciting opportunity, and if we are able to reach a 19% reduction in greenhouse gases by 2035, that will be nothing short of a miracle. And I think it's definitely something worth pursuing. And with that, I'd adopt the resolution. Acknowledging.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Before I call for a vote, I would just like to address a little bit more of Sue Rodman's comments in that a lot of this is being, as you probably know, these are state and federal regulations, and we have been, we're part of a region that the state has determined can somehow make this, I think, an extremely difficult number. We have way more challenges than a lot of the same regions, as we've heard from staff and from James, as far as what our environment is like. So much of the pollution blows into El Dorado County on the prevailing southerly winds every afternoon. So I see us as a receiver. And and I appreciate your comments and the questions. I don't think we really are at the point where we can answer them. I think, Michael, appreciate you just described a couple of things that would happen if we aren't in compliance with this. This is a long-term goal, but you can bet that they will hold us accountable to it as benchmarks come along. So we're going to have to try and work to do this. The high density and your concerns for evacuations are absolutely, those sound very true, and we're very aware of that. And going forward, the lessons that we should all communities should learn from the Paradise disaster is to have a lot of forethought in how we plan any of the densities in our city. So I would just ask for your patience, and it's going to take a while to evolve. And I would just say that I too find that this is greatly appreciate SACOG's work on this and trying to be ahead of this, trying to help do everything that we can to make the state realize that we are a unique region that needs a little bit more consideration before they throw out such global numbers as they do with the coastal communities. So with that, I will go ahead and ask for a roll call vote.
Mayor Acuna?
Aye.
Councilmember Borelli?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Zaragoza?
Aye.
Councilmember Taylor?
Aye.
Councilmember Thomas?
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you very much. Mr. Cross, thank you again for coming up this evening. I know you have long days, and we appreciate your visit to Placerville. And thank you also toward the other community members that spoke on this. We appreciate your concern. So with that, we have moved item 12.5 up into the agenda. It will be heard next. And Mr. Morris is going to have the staff report. Item 12.5 is requested direct staff on how to proceed with the review and selection of the proposals for historic City Hall building. Mr. Morris.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. As you recall, on November 26th, the Council released a request for proposals to solicit proposals for the reuse of historic City Hall. Proposals were due on February 26th, and 2 proposals were received as of the deadline, one from the El Dorado Arts Council and the second from the Nisenan Miwok Nation. The next step in our process that was defined in the proposals is to present in a public meeting to a committee the proposals and make recommendations to the City Council. At this time, staff is seeking direction on that committee that has not been formed or selected that would hear those proposals. Staff has presented some options. It could be simply a council committee, it could be an independent committee, it could be a combination. After further review, staff, or my recommendation on this is that we consider 2 members of the council and perhaps a member of our Placerville Economic Advisory Committee. I spoke to the chair of that committee today, Deborah Miller, who I think would be an excellent choice to be part of that committee, and she has agreed that if the council so desires, to be part of that committee. Remember that this is just a committee to hear the proposals. It will be an open public meeting. The proposals can be presented, ask questions of those applicants who submitted proposals, and then that committee will make a recommendation to the City Council. It's my anticipation that they will make that recommendation, but then also possibly have the proposers make a presentation to the City Council at that time also, so you'll get the full presentation. But with that, I'm open to other suggestions. That is just one that could be followed, and I'll answer any questions the council may have on the process or the selection of that committee.
Any questions for Cleve on this particular item? Cleve, your idea is to the important thing to remember at this stage in the process is that let's call it a subcommittee, if this is where we got this direction we take. They would just review the presentations by the two groups that have submitted, and then Deborah Miller would be a member in that. In her role as the Economic Advisory Committee chair seems appropriate because we're looking at these for, the compliance with the overall scope of Main Street, but also the viability of what's presented and the realistic expectations of fundraising and financing and such. It's kind of the first test, if you will.
Right.
And they would be reviewing that in a public format and then making a recommendation to the entire council.
Correct.
And then, at that point, there would be a second hearing with the entire council and the reports to be heard again in public.
Yes.
With that committee's recommendations. All right. There's no questions for Cleve at this point. Mr. Driscoll, did you have a comment? Well, thank you. I appreciate your attendance.
I do have one. There is so much involved in this particular idea of doing these, or having somebody love and take care of these buildings and move these buildings forward in our community, that we really need to consider how we approach this very seriously, because
Absolutely.
and I know that we are, and I know this is a great process. I don't know if we don't want to have some members of the community be involved in this as well as on top of this. If it is just a review process, I think having a few people from the community at large would be good, and outside of the peak and outside of the council members. So.
And I'm open to that also, council. My question is, how would you like to select those people?
And how, what's the number are you talking about? How many?
That's up to you.
Oh, okay.
We have to ask
No,
them.
there's no
Okay.
definite-
Timeliness, I think, is important.
I'm sorry?
Correct.
Timeliness is important. We need to
Yes.
get this done
Yes.
quickly. We need to get this done quickly. Kara, did you have a?
When I first read this item, my original thought was to have a larger committee than 3 and to have some members from the community as well.
Okay.
How do you go about selecting those?
I'm kind of thinking 5
Yeah.
is probably.
Okay. And then advisory staff, Cleve, would you see yourself and maybe Mr. Ravas as advisory
Yes,
staff to this committee?
right, yes.
As the kind of nonpartisan bystanders, if you will. All right.
One option you could consider, and I don't know how you'd like to select these, but you could consider selecting from your former Blue Ribbon Committee, city-appointed members to that committee if you wanted to use them to be part of this committee.
It's an interesting idea.
I don't have those names
I don't
with me
either.
tonight, but that's an option you could consider.
Could we, because I do think time is definitely a factor here, could we delegate to the city manager to put together some community members so that we can move forward with this expeditiously, as opposed to trying to kind of figure out up here right now who and if they even could?
I think that's a good idea.
That's an excellent idea. That's why he's vice mayor.
How do you feel about that?
Sorry,
Thanks a lot.
just one extra thing for you.
If your desire is to have like a 5-member committee,
Yeah.
and I guess my question would go back, do you want to have council members represented on that
I
committee?
think there should be.
Yeah, there should be.
So
Yeah.
two
should
council
be two
members, so
council
we would have
members.
3 others. I would suggest the Economic Advisory Committee,
Mm-hmm.
and if you want to delegate that to me, I would look at the Blue Ribbon Committee, I think is what I'd do, and
that's
see
a
who
good
our
idea.
city representatives were and select 2 of those.
That seems appropriate because those are people that have expressed interest in the past
Mm-hmm.
to be involved in the.
And didn't they already do some homework on that? I mean, they.
Yeah, they have.
They
Yeah,
have done
they
some.
have. It's been a while. Well, Cleve, that the
Great.
group,
Yep.
it's
They
been
were,
probably,
yeah.
what, a year
Yeah.
since they've met? All right.
Yeah,
So-
we did disband
We
that
dissolved
committee,
it,
so
yeah.
they're
But
no-
still, those are folks that have expressed the interest
Right.
and attended meetings, which is important. All right, now that you've heard us have a brief discussion up here, I'm going to open this item up to the public and invite any member in the audience to address the council on item 12.5, a review committee for Old City Hall. Good evening.
Good evening again, Mayor Acuna and members of the council. And that was what I came down here to say tonight, was that I thought that members of the Blue Ribbon Committee would be perfect. Now, I was a member of it, but I'm not asking to be appointed. And we sent out a survey for that area, and it had a picture of the courthouse on it, and it had a picture of City Hall, and people sent back a survey, and then we held a meeting one night where the results of those surveys were given. And so I think it's very important to include members of the Blue Ribbon Committee because they really are very familiar with the thoughts of the community on those buildings through the survey. So thanks.
Thank you, Kathy. Appreciate you coming down this evening. Any other member of the public wishing to address the council on item 12.5?
I think Kathy, it's Sue Rodman. I think Kathy had a really good point about the Blue Ribbon Committee. I think that you need to have somebody from the city council, somebody from a local organization, somebody from business, citizens such as the Blue Ribbon Committee especially, to bring a balance to that committee, and so that you'll get buy-in from all of the areas of the city and all of the citizens of the city.
Thank you, Sue. Is there anyone else wishing to address the council? Good evening,
Mayor
Kurt.
Acuna, good,
If you could pull the, there
certainly.
we, thank you, sir.
Let me just skip the substance, but just address the procedure. City manager is a straight shooter. He apologized once before when the public, merchants in particular, didn't get enough notice about the EIR regarding the courthouse. The notice that you sent out, coming in the next day, went to the only staff person. You may not have known, but at that same meeting, she spoke on behalf of one of the two proponents, one of the two applicants. Another board member spoke on behalf of the other applicant. Hardly a neutral panel. Most of you know that you're not going to have a chance to study something that you're given on a Friday night. Merchants work 40, 50, 60 hours a week minimum. And this has happened over and over and over. You give this stuff about, I'm sorry if I'm not going to be happy about it, because you can't give this stuff about, oh, it's imperative, because when you had this before us, before yourselves this last December, you were talking about having a meeting in January. It's now March. So waiting around and creating this urgency, this sense of emergency, is not necessary. It's better to do it right and not at all. I'm asking you to continue it. I don't expect you to, but you, Mayor Acuna, and John Clarici would know, for example, how a subject of great interest to downtown merchants, the courthouse, was a number of times raised, and there'd be rooms packed with them, and then you'd wait until the very end for them. And then one by one, they start to leave. And one person, as you may remember, Mr. Acuna, said that it's unfortunate that the people in the business community weren't interested and stuck around. They worked 60 hours a week often, and the last person who left had a 12-year-old daughter at home alone. That's why she left. It's not the way to treat the public. You got to give them notice. And the Brown Act requires 3 days notice. That's a minimum. It's not some kind of guideline. Every one of you knew or could have, or should have known that this was an important issue. Right now, about 10 minutes away, because of the race for the state senator first district election, there's a room filled with a couple hundred people for a forum. That's where you have a lot of people. Now, maybe if you continued it, nobody show up. The point is that at least you'd show respect for the merchants. And it doesn't do that. And this happens over and over and over. It's been mentioned before. So, and then somebody will say, well, you got a point there. We'll try to do better. And it happens over and over and over. So just to save you time in advance, you don't have to say that because it's been said before. And you keep doing the same thing. This is not a way to treat merchants. Even if the city manager had sent out notice before, like Thursday night, there's only a dozen people, as a number of you know, that have been there. Not, how many 100 or so merchants that are on Main Street. And this affects them. They're surrounded by it. And you can talk about how important it is. You're the folks that once sold it, literally, and then the contract went out because of reasons you know about. So give the public a chance to be involved.
Thank you for your comments,
Thank
Kurt.
you.
Appreciate it. Any other member of the public wish to address the council on this item? Now you have 3 minutes, Mr. Clarici.
I won't even need that one. Okay, this is a trope that gets used all the time. There's never enough time. We have to talk to the merchants. God bless the merchants on Main Street. You know what? There'll never be enough time. You could give them 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 5 weeks, and it'll still not be enough time. There'll be plenty of opportunities for everyone to hear what the two proposals are about, and that's what's important here. So, I wasn't going to say anything, but I heard my name mentioned, and I said, I'm going to come up. You'll hear this all the time. What you will hear all the time is how the merchants never get told anything. Well, all of us work really hard. I work 50 or 60 hours a week. I'm self-employed, all right? I managed to figure out a way to know what's going on in town. That's the end of it. So you folks make a decision, make it well, and have your committee, and it'll be fine. And there'll be plenty of people here to talk about those two old buildings. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any other member of the public, excuse me, wish to address the council on item 12.5? Seeing no one else approaching the podium, I'll close public comment on this item. And just to address the issue as far as notifications and timeliness and extensions and continuations of items, we are already a few weeks behind where I would like to see us on this item. I mean, here it is this evening. If there are a couple of hundred folks that have assembled down the street at a political rally, then that is a choice that those couple hundred folks made, that they wanted to go watch politicians or potential Senate candidates do their thing. We've had the item duly noted that it was going to be reviewed this evening. The other thing that we need to keep in mind is that the council is hopefully here in just a couple of minutes going to give staff direction to create a committee that is going to have a public meeting where that committee will sit through the presentations from the two groups that we received applications from. At that public meeting, the public will be able to hear everything that it sounds like the group is going to be a 5-member board. Staff will also be present. There'll be ample opportunity for the Senate candidates and the Main Street merchants to be at that meeting. Once that meeting is held, a recommendation will be developed from the committee that will come to the full city council that will again be duly notified and agendized. The room will be open for public comment for, will we see the presentations at that time, Cleve, or would it be just on the recommendation of the committee?
I think that we can have further discussion on that. We hadn't really decided one way or the other, but I think that it may be advisable to have both presentations.
It seems very reasonable.
It may require a special meeting for that, because it may take some time to get through those.
So there would be, I would anticipate another second full viewing, if you will, of the proposals from the two applicants as well as the information from the committee. So I think the small ministerial step that we're going to take this evening is an appropriate one. And with that, I would ask if there's someone that would like to make a motion to direct staff to form
Mr. Mayor, can I make one comment?
Sure.
Based on, I want to answer a little bit Mr. Smith's comments, and I don't know maybe if this is his concern. At the meeting, the PDA meeting on Thursday night, I was asked if perhaps PDA could have a representative on this committee. However, later in the meeting, it was also brought up the PDA was asked to be a partner with one of the applicants on this for this proposal. So when I responded back later that night to Heidi Meyerhofer, staff to the PDA, I said, I'm adding this item to the agenda to create the committee. I apologize, I didn't think of it at the meeting that I was going to put that on there. And I stated it would be a conflict for PDA because of your potential association or partnership with one of the applicants for you to be on that committee. So I don't know if that's part of the concern. Could they be on the committee? I would not recommend that they be on the committee because I think they have a conflict due to the request of one of the applicants to partner with them. So I just wanted to explain that for you.
Okay, very good. Well, thank you very much, Cleve. Yeah, I think that's important to keep that separation. So, do I hear a motion?
I'll move to appoint, to direct staff to appoint the committee.
Second.
And that committee would be comprised of?
5, yes.
5, and it would be?
Comprised of 2 council members and 2 blue ribbon committee members, and Debbie Miller.
The economic.
From our economic development.
My only request of part of that, or if you wanted to have a second motion, is that you appoint your 2 council members tonight as part of that.
All right. Who would like to, I would nominate
I'll
the vice
volunteer
mayor.
I would volunteer as well.
Michael, are you?
That's good.
All right. Very good. All right, so the motion is to create a committee composed of 5 members plus staff, 2 members of city council, being Councilmember Taylor and Councilmember Borelli, and the Economic Development Chair, Deborah Miller, and 2 members of the Blue Ribbon Committee to be contacted by the city manager. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Roll call vote, please.
Mayor Acuna?
Aye.
Councilmember Borelli?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Zaragoza?
Aye.
Councilmember Taylor?
Aye.
Councilmember Thomas.
Aye.
Motion carries. Now, Cleve, do you have any idea when you might anticipate this group getting together?
I'll have to call him and then arrange schedules, see when we can get the 5 of them together, and then want to give ample time to notice that those presentations, both for the presenters and for the public that may want to attend that. So I'm guessing we're probably at least 2 weeks out.
2 to 3 weeks.
2 to 3
All right,
weeks.
very good. So if anybody has any questions on the progress in regards to that, they can contact you at your office?
Yes.
All right, very good. So if anyone has any concerns, contact the city manager. All right, back to our regularly scheduled agenda, which would bring us to item 12.2, if my math is still correct. Acknowledge and file, oh, the lights are about to go down. Acknowledge and file fiscal year 2018-2000 mid-year budget report as presented by Mr. Warren, and I'd hoped Mr. Clarici was going to stay, but. Good evening, Mr. Warren.
Good evening, Mr.
Thank you
Mayor,
for your
members
patience.
of the council. Tonight's report purpose is to answer 2 primary questions. One is how's the local economy doing, and is the city living within its means? So we'll review the local economic climate, and we'll take a look at the general fund and all of your other operating funds. Jumping right into unemployment rates, you can see the regional and the state unemployment rates for the last 12 months. So we have the state of California, El Dorado County, and the SAC metropolitan statistical area in the city of Placerville. And the good news is overall regional unemployment rates remain low during 2018. As of December 2018, all regional areas remain below 5%, which is considered full employment. And drilling down to the city of Placerville's unemployment rate, you can see we've made significant improvement over the last 5 years. 5 years ago, your unemployment rate was in double-digit 12%. It's currently, as of December, 4.0, which again is considered full employment. So very good news. Looking at the residential real estate sales in the greater Placerville area, you can see the volume is kind of 50-50. Some months are up, some months are down. 6 months overall were up in volume, and 6 months were down. When you talk to the real estate experts, they believe we're in a neutral market. It's not a buyer's market. It's not a seller's market. So it's still okay. Looking at the values, actually 8 out of 12 months in 2018 were up, which is good. Now I'm going to hand it over to Matt Lishman to talk about recreation fee program revenue.
Yeah, looking at the next couple of slides, this first slides, these show our program participation numbers between July and December, and it has a comparison of 2017, 2018, and you'll see that our Gold Bug Park tours overall are up. Daily tours are up quite a bit, and the Gold Bug group tours are down slightly. Those aren't the number of group tours, that's the total number of participants on the group tours. In the aquatics program, some of the programs are down, and we talked about that a little bit at our last council meeting, and we got some new ideas to help increase those numbers. But on this slide, it shows like the evening swim, for example, was down quite a bit. That's one of the big areas we're going to be working on. Public swim, overall public swim was down a little bit, but some of our exercise programs were up. Swimming lessons was up, which is fantastic. Anytime we can get that program up, that's great. Then going to the next slide, our camps and special interest classes are all up. We're always trying to find new camps and classes to do there, so that's great. The adult sports, our 3-on-3 basketball league was up a couple of teams. Our 5-on-5 league was down. Unfortunately, I think this particular league, as you can see, we had 4 teams so far this year, and I think in one of our seasons we only had 3, so we couldn't have a league. So this number really could have been like 7, but because we didn't have enough teams, we had to cancel the league. Softball is down quite a bit, and this is kind of a trend across the whole Northern California Softball Association. So unfortunately, we're just not getting a lot of new, younger softball players coming out. Volleyball was about the same. Youth basketball was up this year. We had 2 more teams than last year, which was great. And then the banner reservation, we just had one less than last year. So, thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Now I'll hand it over to Pierre Rivas to talk about development fee program trends.
Thank you, Dave. The first graph you're looking at is building division activity, and basically it's just showing you what the actual what we received for 2014, 2015, and 15-16, 16-17, 17-18, and then the first half of the fiscal year for 2018-19, and then we project the forecast. So as you can see, starting at 2014-15, we're a little bit, we're only 114,000, and we continue sort of an upswing. We're doing better and better until we get to 2017-18, and then we start to level off, and you'll see in some of the graphs that'll come a little bit later, you'll be able to see that graphically, that we're sort of at a plateau. In fact, we're sort of, maybe we could see a reduction in the number of building division activity. Not to say we aren't immeasurably busy right now. We're doing very well considering, but it looks like things may be leveling off, and staff tried to be very conservative. We didn't want to look at forecasting projects that we're still not sure we're going to get. Say, for example, a hotel, something like that could have a very dramatic effect on these forecasts. So going to the next slide, issued building permits. Here's where you can actually see where we're leveling off. So, we were doing fairly well, sort of an upswing from 2011, 2012, and you can see all the way up till 2016, 17. Then we're leveling off, and we're actually projecting to see a little bit of a decrease. If you look at that graph, you can see the red dot. That red dot sort of shows you where we were at mid-year for each of these fiscal years as a comparison. Going to the next slide, this is building valuations. And so maybe this one's a little bit more erratic, and I think you would see that where we have some good commercial activity, can really push those valuations way up, such as you saw in 2015, 2016, and then 16 and 17. We had some commercial activity, some commercial buildings that really pushed the valuations up. We saw quite a decrease in 2017-18, but we started doing a little bit better, a little bit more housing units coming in at 2018-19. Going to the next slide, this is planning and zoning revenues. So this would be site plan reviews, conditional use permits, general plan amendments, rezones, those land use entitlement permits. You can see we really peaked at 15-16. That's when we pulled out of the Great Recession. There was a lot of pent-up demand, and then we sort of leveled off. So at least what we've been seeing is a lot of existing entitlements being actually implemented and built out. Estonia is an example. We had a development company buy that map, a very old map. They're trying to revitalize it and actually final that map. So we saw a lot of vacant lots being developed. So we looked at development on properties that already had their entitlements, and so we haven't been seeing a whole lot of planning entitlements necessary in order to develop the property, and you sort of see that in this graph. Moving on to single-family dwellings, that's been sort of the bulwark of our work. We haven't built any apartments in well over 20 years, but we have built a few ADUs, accessory dwelling units, some duplexes, but mainly single-family dwellings, and you can see that where we were in the recession, not much activity going on, and then boom, that pent-up demand really let loose in about 2016, 2017, and but then we came down in 2017, 2018. only 5 permits, but we're still projecting quite a few. We're looking at hopefully 30, so a little optimistic, but still being conservative in those estimates, because it's through all of these estimates then that we generate our projections on impact fees, which takes us to the next slide, the impact fees. So here you can see the different fiscal years are colored. And so we have the traffic as the first set of graphs there, and then sewer, CIC, water, and then park fees that we collect. All these impact fees are collected upon issuance of the building permit, so we track those, and that allows us to be able to provide this information to you. But again, you can see where we've sort of been going down a lot of that because, again, a commercial development is going to yield a very high traffic impact mitigation fee, where residential not as much. So moving on to, well, I think that's it. The impact fees concludes development services graphs. Happy to answer any questions you have at this point.
Thank you, Pierre, and I'll hand it over to Rebecca Neves to talk about engineering fees.
So thank you very much. So the impact fees and the CIC fees are technically classified as engineering fees. And so one of the things to kind of note is kind of to build on to what Mr. Rivas was stating. In 2015, we had a bit of a spike in the planning and zoning revenues, which makes sense then that the subsequent spike in impact fees would follow that in 2017, 2018. We did have a bit of a jump in our encroachment permit fees. We're actually working on doing a little bit of streamlining with the encroachment permit fees and doing some cost recovery. We're finding that we're challenged with some of our fees are not carrying the actual costs associated with staff time and coverage for those fees. So that'll be something that will get brought back forth at a different time. For the CIC fees and, for the water CIC fees, sewer CIC fees, they are following the same trend as well as the TIM fees. As Mr. Rivas mentioned, they are collected at the time of building permit, but we have quite a few amount of fees that are deferred, and the larger amount there is shown on the far right coming forward later on in this year. And that concludes my summary.
Thank you, Rebecca. Now switching to sales tax, or Bradley Burns, which is your general fund sales tax, which is the most significant local economic indicator. It represents 56.45% of your general fund. You do have strong per capita sales tax. In 2017, it was $444. We actually just got our 2018 today, our per capita, and it's $471. In 2017, we were ranked number 38 out of 539 cities, and as of 2018, we were ranked 34. So we've gained 4 points in our position, and someday we hope to be number 1. So,
closer to it.
Right. Yeah, a little bit closer. So the quarter ended September 2018, which is our most current quarter. As of when this report was issued, we actually experienced 19.65% or $248,000 in growth. However, there's devils in the details. There were actually 4 of your top 10 businesses that were either didn't report or partially reported due to a state software glitch. And so they actually, in the previous quarter, let me back up. So in the second quarter of 2018, they were underreported. This quarter, they reported the retroactive activity, so that overinflated those numbers. So if you take out the adjustment, it's about a 7% increase roughly. Still healthy. It surpasses inflation. So the statewide third quarter receipts were up by 5.9. We also received today the growth factor for the fourth quarter, and it was just above 4%, which we'll talk a little bit later. Looking at your contributors, proportionally it's about the same. You can see the various categories: auto dealers, building, construction, fuel, general consumer, so on and so forth. Proportionally about the same. The biggest contributors, again, auto dealers and building permits in the county pool, which is really important when you look at the next slide, which shows the growth year over year for the third quarter of 2018, you can see that auto dealers grew, and again, there's some retroactivity going on in some of these categories. 12.73% for auto dealers, 26.42% building construction, and you can see there's winners and losers in the various categories. Looking at your sales tax generators, we appreciate all of our businesses in town, especially our top 20, and we have that list here. You can see there's several repeat winners, and there are some that are new. I will like to comment, because some of these may look unique. There may be folks, some businesses that had some adjustments that pushed them into the top 20. I can't tell you exactly who those are because it's confidential, but so it may come as a surprise, some of these businesses that are on this list, and as we go quarter to quarter, the list does change slightly, so that's all I can say. Looking at the growth factors, sorry about that, you can see that by quarter we have the historical growth factors that actually occurred, and the forecast. So what we use is the statewide growth factors generated by the California Department of Tax and Fee Administration, and they are actually forecasting for 2019, for the first quarter of 2019, 5.1%, and then 5.3% for April and June. And again, for the quarter ending December 31st, we actually experienced 4.14%. We had budgeted 3.5%, so it's actually a gain of about 0.64 percentage points, which is great. So overall, your 2018-19 sales tax, I see there's a typo up there. That should be 17-18. Sorry about that. So in 17-18, the total was just over above 4.7 million. Forecasted 18-19, a little over 5 million. And overall, that's a $288,622 increase, or 6.02% increase year over year. Looking historically, I went back 13 years, so you can kind of see the recession, where we were, how low it got, and then where we're at today. The red bar indicates actual receipts. The blue indicates an adjustment, an annual adjustment for inflation, and the green is cumulative inflation. So you can see that the forecast in 18-19 is actually right above. It's about the 2011-12 range, and inflation at that point is 38.64%. So you know. You did adopt a budget in June of last year. It totaled $19.5 million. The general fund portion was $9 million, included a $75,000 contingency, and you also had $72,000 in capital improvement program projects. Looking at the adopted budget, and this was before the reorganization that you approved last year, police 34 cents, development services 13, community services 33, elected officials 1 cent, administration 7, finance 4, and non-departmental 7. Now this shows you the revised budget. So we took your adopted budget, any revisions you made to that budget, and we show you that to you. You can see that we actually had a $66,000 deficit. Now that was a planned deficit because you approved equipment, about $67,000 in equipment to do some one-time equipment purchases. Our forecast is actually better. So revenues are actually projected to be $121,000 more than budget. Expenditures are actually forecast to be $241,000 less. Transfers, instead of a $36,000 net transfer out, we're projecting, a transfer in, we're projecting $52,000 out, primarily because of projected liability claim exposure. So projected forecast surplus of $208,706. And if you look at over the last 10 years, you can see that back in 9-10 and 10-11, we actually expenditures exceeded revenue, and then we had a really good ride between 11-12 and 2014-15, 15-16, and then we had a slight deficit in 16-17 and 17-18, primarily due to one-time spending, so equipment and capital projects. We did have some claims that we had to deal with that were one-time in nature, but this year we are projecting a general fund surplus. In looking at the revenues by category, we did cover sales tax, all other taxes, that's property tax, TOT, business license, franchise tax fees, real estate transfer tax. You can see that actually projecting slightly less, $3,100. Construction permits, actually development services hit above their budget as of December and are projecting additional revenue. So by the end of the year, if that comes to fruition, being over budget by $87,000. Intergovernmental revenue, that $51,000 gain is actually due to higher than expected vehicle license fee property tax. Charges for service, we do anticipate $60,000 more, and that could be any, Parks and Rec fees, planning. It's primarily gains in planning fees, why we see that $60,000 gain there. Fines and forfeitures, slight increase there due to fines and forfeitures. Use of money and property, that's things like rentals and interest, sundries, those kind of things, about a $4,300 gain. And the other financing sources, cost recovery, slightly down, but we're being conservative. It could be at budget, but that's what we're forecasting right now. So again, $121,000 above budget, which is good. Expenditures, again, $152,000 less. When we look at the departments, and now this is looking at your budget with the reorganization, you can see the police department, $379,000 below budget. That's primarily due to vacancies in positions, one police officer position part of the year, as well as 3 dispatchers offset by the county contract that we had the first 4 months of the year, fiscal year. And then you can see the variances there. When you look at engineering and community services, there's more activity. They're developing more fees, so there's more costs. For example, development services, we contract with Interwest to do our plan checks and some of our inspections, so there's an additional cost when we collect more fees there. And public works, just unforeseen costs, savings there. Administration, we do have a receivership of a property that we've been dealing with and the legal fees associated with that. That's the primary cost driver there. Finance, overall personnel, there was changes in medical insurance of a couple of employees, so that's changed there. Non-departmental, the $114,000 more. That's primarily due to claims and primarily claims is that difference. So total $152,000 net less expenditures for your general fund. This does assume pay-as-you-go for your what we call OPEB, other post-employment benefits. GASB 45, it used to be GASB, it's actually now GASB 75. So your annual contribution's about $353,000 right now. That's going to go up a little bit. What we're actually contributing pay-as-you-go is about actually, no, I take it back. It's about $79,000, so big difference. But so right now we're not pre-funding. We're just doing pay-as-you-go. We do assume for budgeting purposes, and you have identified your entire contingency. So to recap, again, your surplus is primarily due to $121,000 in additional revenues and $152,000 less in expenditures. Measure J, the only bad news I really have tonight is Measure J. You may recall during the Great Recession, expenditures exceeded revenues, primarily because revenues were declining. Revenues had been increasing in Measure J, however, our personnel costs are exceeding the pace of revenues, and so we did anticipate a deficit this year of $238,000. We forecast right now, based on current trends, $355,000. You do have in reserves $305,000, so that means that you would have a shortfall of about $49,000. What that means is your general fund will most likely have to make up the difference, and that's something as we go into next fiscal year's budget that we're going to have to grapple with, that structural deficit that has kind of become apparent in that fund. So we'll talk to you more about that through the budgeting development process. Measure H, great news, sales tax. Overall is trending slightly below, but still pretty close to budget. And again, that is paying for about $500,000 in debt service. Instead of raising your rates another 10%, it's helping do that. And then another $500,000 for projects, water sewer projects. Measure L, similar story. We actually project $4,200 higher. Now, remember, this is the little over the second year for Measure L. So when you start a new sales tax, there's usually little bugs here and there. Some businesses aren't reporting, they're not under-reporting, or they're over-reporting. So there's little adjustments that have to be made, and so that's why you see a slight difference when you look at Measure H and L. But we do anticipate receiving $2.1 million for projects by the end of the year. Water Enterprise Fund, your new rate revenue is trending right at budget. I anticipate hitting our budget pretty close to what we budgeted. Development fees, as Mr. Rivas indicated, and Ms. Neves, is that our collection of water CICs is actually up this year. And that's the primary difference, the $236,000 gain in revenues. Expenditures slightly down, $54,000. So we anticipate $295,000 being set aside for future projects and reserves in your Water Enterprise Fund. Sewer Enterprise Fund, similar story. Revenues are trending. Your sewer rate revenues are trending at budget. Your impact fees, though, are having a good year. We anticipate collecting $228,000 more in impact fees approximately than that's the primary driver there. And expenditures and transfers, we have one claim, knock on wood, that for a sewer backup that we're dealing with, and so I anticipate having to transfer out $30,000 to cover that claim, and that does include that $729,000 too. Remember that Measure H is being transferred in the entire annual appropriate revenue into your Sewer Enterprise Fund. Half of that is being used to pay debt, and then the other half is being used for projects and also serving as part of your coverage for debt, your coverage ratio. So that's why it looks like it has a surplus of $729,000, but it's actually, that's going to go towards projects. More good news, downtown parking is doing very well. Revenues, primarily citation revenues, are up. That's the primary gain there for $47,000 higher revenues. We started out with a budget having about $93,000 for capital projects, $40,000 for just regular CIP, and then $53,000 potentially for CIP and a sinking fund for long-term capital replacement. We actually anticipate $147,000 by the year end, and that would leave $107,000 over your regular $40,000 CIP for either additional CIP or your long-term set aside for long-term CIP. Non-major funds, I really don't have anything to comment on these. I just wanted to show them to you just so you can see them. You have your gas tax fund, SRO grant, AB 3229 OTS grant, smaller funds, Bulletproof Vest, you got your 2014 CHP grant, general CIP fund in Orchard Hill, Cottonwood, and the Ridge, the two Zone 1, Zone 1A, general liability, and then lastly, the Reserve for Economic Uncertainties, which is that budget. So your total operating budget, revised revenues $22,359,031, expenditures $19,606,495, leaving $2,752,536. And of course, that's before capital. That a lot of that revenue is going towards capital replacement. Forecast $23,060,748, or $701,000 more than budget in revenue, and then 19.5 million, 35,000 actually lower expenditures, so leaving you with a $3.4 million surplus. Again, those dollars primarily dedicated to capital. So we did talk about the economy. The economy, you know, in the last 12 months and what we're seeing right now, things are good. You know, things are slowing down, like we talked about the housing market, sales tax. In past years, we've had some quarters where we saw quite a few double-digit increases. We're seeing more normal increases. So things are good. However, things are, you know, slowing down just a little bit. We just need to be cautious when we look at our budget going into next year. So again, City Council and management continue to operate the city in a prudent, responsible manner. We anticipate year-end operating revenues to exceed operating expenditures for the most funds. And the staff will provide another update to the City Council at its May 8th budget workshop, which is on your calendar. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions, comments. I would like to thank all the other departments for their help putting this together. There's a lot of information, as you've seen from all the other departments. Thank you.
I love the leprechaun.
We're back. Thank you, Dave. Now, as always, Mr. Warren has given us a very thorough briefing on where we stand halfway through our budget year, and we appreciate that. Are there any questions, comments for Dave? All right.
I have a question. I'm going to ask this, and I'll probably regret it after I'm done asking it.
Maybe not.
Maybe that's a clue I shouldn't ask the question, but
No,
I'm
go
going to
ahead.
do it anyway.
Think about it again.
Yeah. When you talked about the inflation on slide 22, you talked about inflation and how we're back to 2012. If you apply inflation to the numbers that we're getting now, it reflects back. It looks like 2012 numbers.
Right.
And how does that affect in terms of out of pocket? Now, this may be a stretch to bring these two together, but one of the things I look at is how much it costs an individual to live in this city and what we're contributing, and how does that reflect in terms of our today dollars that we're spending? Are we spending more or less as individuals or individual house owners or citizens of this city? Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So $1 today is worth more than $1 tomorrow, as we know. And so $1 back, say, around 2010-11 is now worth about 60 cents. So, and that explains why, you know, people go, well, it looks like the city's doing really well, which relatively we are. But when you, in other words, our budget is getting bigger, we're getting more revenue. But it also costs more to provide the service. For example, although we're doing better, we're still down about 19 positions in the city. We had about 101 positions. We now have about 82 positions, full-time positions. So that's one of the explanations is, yes, we have recovered in a lot of ways, but we haven't fully recovered to where we were back then. And the other thing is there are certain pressures, you know, for example, health insurance, pensions that have outpaced normal inflation that are putting pressure on your budget. I hope does that answer your question? Or?
It does. The reason I ask is, you know, my experience with the fire district is, you know, we rely on property tax, which is different than sales tax, and it functions different as well. But what I find is that people, that the expense to an individual to live in this city is not going up consistent with the cost of running the city, and you know. And so I just wanted to understand that relationship between those two, and whether that's a real thing or if it's just, I just wanted to understand it because I really didn't wrap my head around the cost to an individual as opposed to.
And it probably depends on the individual. Is it somebody that's retired on a fixed income, or is it somebody with a family and a growing salary, those kind of things, or maybe just, you know, two people just starting out or a single person just starting out.
All right.
Yeah, no, it's a great question.
Thank you.
Do you have another question? That was it? Oh, thank you. Any other questions for Dave? Michael? All right, I'm going to open this up to the public. Is any member of the public wish to address the council on the mid-year budget review as presented by Mr. Warren?
Sue Rodman, member of Measure H&L, which I'm very proud to see is doing some good work for the city, and thanks to Dave and Rebecca is staying well balanced and actually getting some work done. Looks like our city's in pretty good shape, and I think that's thanks to the council and to excellent staff and to an excellent finance director. I have one comment on the Measure J fund. I'd love to see a flyer like the flyer that we put in the water bills for Measure H&L that shows the community the benefits of Measure J for our police department. And that's...
Thank you, Sue. Appreciate the compliment and the suggestion. I can remember back when Measure J was first adopted, and it was breaking edge technology to go out and to find a way to save the police department, really, at that time. And it kind of goes back to what it's doing now. It's probably very appropriate to think about doing a little public relations on what it is and where those funds go once they're generated. Would that be a potential to see in our water bill coming to me soon?
I can work with Dave Warren on that and see what we can put together.
I kind of suspect that a lot of people don't even know we have
Yes,
Measure
that's
J,
what I'm
so it might
thinking.
be a good information.
Maybe they'd like to make a donation to Measure J.
Yeah. We could have a fundraiser.
We could have some new. We get Wendy to work on some new signs. It really it was very dangerous ground way back when it was adopted. A very very conservative community and very tax conscious, and it was another example of a message that was delivered clearly with a clear use. And past councils have always been very careful to be transparent with where the Measure J funds went. And the same thing with H and L. So maybe it wouldn't hurt to we do a little, maybe we'll talk offline, but maybe we can do a little, just a little summary of what we're doing with these tax dollars, then the clarity that they're being spent as expected.
We'll work on something to...
Thank you. Is there any, I'll go ahead and, if there's no other comments from the public, I'll close the public comment and bring it back to the council. I believe this is this a receive and file? Acknowledge. So there's no motion needed. Is there any other mid-year budget? I appreciate Dennis and the answer that you gave to his question using the $2010 and my realizing that it's now worth 60 cents. And then I would use the employee analogy. I mean, you look at the $3 million that, as you're careful to point out, is not really an overreach, but it's out there, Dave. It's $3 million. But if we were to go ahead and just put an arbitrary number in there and say we filled those 19 positions that are currently vacant full-time, what would that do to our expenditure side of the house? We're providing the same.
You wouldn't be here.
Yes. Well, but those are still, those service to the community.
I know.
So the police department, public works, park and rec, all the staff, all the engineering, planning, everybody, and finance, and even Cleve. We're doing all this work with a lot fewer folks. That's a lot of employees. But again, there's millions. There's $1 million expense there. I mean, if we were to look at the cost of 19 full, look, see, Dave is breaking out into a sweat. It's but look at the work that's still getting done. So sadly it's a trade-off that we have to be very fluid and agile and responsive with the dedicated groups that we do have to keep the city operating at the levels people expect. So thank you. If there's no other comments, then we'll move on to our next item, which is.
Actually, I just have a quick question.
Absolutely.
Is the goal-setting workshop still set for March 20th?
I believe it's my phone, 20,
I
it's
have it
week from Friday.
Oh,
Are you talking about the budget workshop or goal setting? Goal setting
goal.
is the end of this month, or I want to say March 22nd. Friday, March 22nd
Okay.
Is that right, what you have? And I have it set for 1 to 5.
Okay.
Is that,
That way you
everybody
can buy us-
okay with that
You
still?
can buy us dinner.
Absolutely.
All right, thank you.
Yeah,
March 22nd at what time?
1 o'clock.
We're losing audience members. All right, moving on to, did we get those dates clarified? We had the goal setting workshop, and then we have our first budget workshop,
And that's in May, isn't it?
which
That's
is in May.
May 8th, I believe, is your budget workshop, right,
And
Dave?
what time are we anticipating? Last year, we did those in the earlier afternoon to kind of,
That'll be up to you, council. I know if you have complications during the day, some of you may have that you can't get off to do that. We'll work with your schedule, so.
okay. If we can, I think it was beneficial to start those at, I think we started at 2 or 3.
May 8th is a Wednesday, so see what works. I know for you.
I
that's not-
work later in the afternoon is better.
So how late? Like 4? 3?
I can do 3.
3?
I could probably do 2.
2.
Leave a little early, but yeah.
So 2 or 3 o'clock around, we'll get that set.
Great,
Okay,
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for reminding us of those 2 important dates, Kara. They're going to sneak up on us. All right, item 12.3, adopt a resolution, mitigated negative deck, and also approve the solar voltaic project out at the wastewater treatment plant. Mr. Voss, do you have that staff report?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. I'm going to take everybody back a while to November of 2015. The city entered into a contract with Johnson Controls, and they were hired actually to look at the city energy needs and develop both water and energy efficiency projects for the city. And one of these projects is a solar array proposed for our Hangtown Creek wastewater treatment facility. We're looking at a 2.88 acre portion of the site. That's the northeast portion of the site, right above the FEB, which stands for Flow Equalization Basin. That's that big, looks like a giant swimming pool, but I don't recommend swimming in it if there happens to be water in it. But anyways, we do have a slope that is south-facing, which is very, very suitable to install and operate a photovoltaic PV system. This project, the energy efficiency of this project would significantly advance the city's mission of reducing its demand for a traditional electricity generation and reducing its impact on the environment while providing improved services more efficiently. The city is proposing to finance the project through the small community grant and the Clean Water State Revolving Loan Fund programs that are administered through the State Water Resources Control Board. They're a division of financial assistance. To talk a little bit more about the project, again, the project would consist of clearing all the vegetation and trees that exist on that 2.88 acre site in order to prepare it for installation of the PV system. The existing vegetation would be completely removed and there'd be ground cover placed once the PV system is installed. And it includes ground-mounted racking system that would be on piers driven below the ground surface. Grading would occur throughout the project area. And we're looking at approximately 300 piers to be percussion driven throughout the project site. So with that, one of the requirements is this is a project subject to the California Environmental Quality Act, and staff prepared the mitigated negative declaration that is before you. So negative declaration means that the city would be making a finding that there is no potential for significant impact to the environment based on or resulting from implementation of the project. And mitigated means that any potential impacts have been mitigated to a less than significant level. And we've attached the draft before you. This MND was circulated to the state clearinghouse, which then circulated it to concerned agencies, state agencies. There was a 30-day public review on this document. It was listed, shown in the paper. The 30-day period was from January the 30th through February the 28th of this year. Staff received 2 comments one from the State Water Board, and then another set of comments from the Central Valley Regional Water Quality Control Board. And essentially, we made some changes. I'll talk a little bit about those changes just to sort of daylight them for the council and to the public. Looking at page 1, it was an interesting comment. In my many years of working on environmental documents, I've never had a comment on the actual project title. So you'll see what any changes made through the document are shown as underline and strike out so that the council and the public can see what changes were made resulting from those comments. So the title that we had listed was Hangtown Creek Water Reclamation Facility Clean Water State Revolving Loan Solar Voltaic Facility. The water board felt that title was a little bit long, and staff agreed, but I think they hung their hat on a new policy with the water board that the loan document, the title of the project that we use on loan documents that mirror that in our CEQA documents. So we are in contact with the state clearinghouse, and they have the ability to change the title for the project. It'll maintain the same state clearinghouse number. So you'll see that throughout. We also change it in the footer as well. So that was the changes to page 1. On page 2, and this was the Central Valley Regional Water Quality Control Board. They had a number of different requirements, but it was more or less of a standard boilerplate letter. So most, if not all, of those requirements did not pertain to this project. There are no wetlands affected. There's no lakes or streams or that kind of thing, and it's further away enough from Hangtown Creek that it won't cause any issue with the creek. But they did point out that through the grading permit process, and the city would administer that grading permit, we would actually issue it to the contractor that would construct the project, that a SWEP would be required, and that stands for Stormwater Pollution Prevention Plan. And that's required, generally speaking, for any industrial project that's over an acre in size, and this one clearly is. So we went ahead and we included that requirement, and you can see that on page 2. And then the only other change we made is on page 23. That was the GEO-1. That was a mitigation measure under the geology and soils. So basically that was just addressing any impacts that may occur due to grading of the site, denuding of the site. And so we added the requirement for the SWEP also under GO1. So with that, staff is confident that a mitigated negative declaration pursuant to CEQA is the appropriate environmental document for the project. So with that, staff is recommending, as revised, that the council would adopt the mitigated negative declaration and the mitigation monitoring program contained within the MND for the solar voltaic PV for the wastewater treatment plant, and then approve the solar voltaic project for the wastewater treatment plant, and then direct staff to file a notice of determination with the El Dorado County Clerk and the State Office of Planning and Research. That concludes staff's report. I'll be happy to answer any questions you have at this time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rivas. Does the council have any questions for staff at this time?
I just can't tell you how happy I am to finally see this come to fruition.
All right. That's a good thing. All right, I'll go ahead and open the public comment on this item. Any member of the public that wishes to address the item 12.3?
Sue Rodman, and having worked to try to get a solar project up for the Placerville nursery for the Forest Service, and it did not go, I agree with Councilmember Borelli. I'm glad to see this one go. It seems to me like there are no heritage oaks on this 3 acres, about 3 acres. My memory says it's small trees that are too dense anyway, and brush. But the question I have is, what's the total cost of the project? The projected savings of $166,000 in electric costs is really hard to evaluate without the total project cost and the debt service cost. And I'd like to know if the payback time is less than the projected useful life of the solar panels. So how much of the project cost will be covered by the energy cost savings? I think those are things we need to know.
Thank you for those comments, Sue. We'll see if we can't get them answered in a minute. Is there any other member of the public wishing to address the council on this item? Seeing no one else approaching the podium, I'll go ahead and close public comment on this item, bring it back to council and staff. Could either Pierre or Cleve, could you answer the questions, the total project cost?
Approximately $3.3 million.
And then the payback time in relation to the useful life of the solar field.
As I recall, I apologize, I didn't bring that report with me, but it's approximately 20 years payback. And we have built into the project the cost of redoing the parts, the equipment parts that can go bad during that time, including panels if necessary. It's usually not the panels, it's other parts on those that go bad. But we do have all that cost built into those. And so the other piece of those numbers were originally based on not based on this program. This program actually, if we're successful with this that we applied for with the regional board, would give us a 50% forgiveness on our loan. So the $3.3 million loan payback would only be about half of that we actually have to pay back. So that considerably cuts into what that payback time. The 20 years was based on the full loan amount.
When will you
and
find
perhaps
out?
even bonds. Well, this is kind of the final step in completing our application process.
okay.
So we're probably still, I'm guessing, at least 6 months away before they'll give us an answer on it. But we seem to meet all the qualifications. In fact, we were originally going down the strict loan process, and they actually notified us, hey, you would qualify for this green program.
I remember that.
And they shifted us to the small community green program, which potentially will put us in this category to receive the 50% forgiveness of our loan. So that's what we're working on.
That'd be just wonderful.
Yeah, thank you for remembering the 50%. I believe that was the issue that swayed my opinion on the project, is the potential to have that cost cut in half. Are there any other, let's see, did we get those? Yes, we did. We got Sue's questions answered. Any other questions? If there isn't any questions for staff, would someone like to make a motion?
I would.
I'll second.
Go forward. Motion. So you would move approval of
I
the...
move approval of the resolution.
And it
adopt
was
the resolution.
seconded by Vice Mayor Saragosa. All right, since this is potentially a lot of money and a negative mitigated declaration, I will ask for a roll call vote, please.
Mayor Acuna?
Aye.
Councilmember Borelli?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Saragosa?
Aye.
Councilmember Taylor?
Aye.
Councilmember Thomas?
Aye.
All right, motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, staff, for your diligence on this one, and the city manager also for your effort. And Sue, thank you for your review of the project. It didn't happen up at the Forest Service Nursery, but maybe it'll happen out at the plant. All right, we're almost there. 12.4, adopt a resolution ratifying some construction services with Doug Veerkamp Engineering. This was the famous sinkhole that occurred over on Spring Street several weeks back during one of our many challenging weather events. Mr. Stone, I believe we get to hear from you this evening.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. On the evening of January 20th, 2019, the Public Works Department was called out to an issue near the intersection of Bedford and Spring Streets. On-call staff initially discovered the asphalt was buckling and heaving. Further inspection revealed that a large subsurface void was the cause of the asphalt issues. Traffic was detoured around the impacted area while crews worked to install trench plates to span the void and impacted area and allow traffic flow to be restored. Due to the late hour and minimal weekend staffing, the area was secured until full levels of staffing would allow the area to be investigated the following morning. On Monday, January 21st, Public Works crews went back out to the work zone. It was discovered that the storm drain had failed and collapsed several feet below the street surface. Due to the nature of the storm drain repair and several other storm-related calls the Public Works Department was currently working on, it was decided that it would be in the city's best interest to contact a private contractor to complete the Spring Street Bedford storm drain repair. Doug Veerkamp General Engineering was contacted. Their crews removed the failed asphalt, excavated the site as necessary, and replaced the failed section of storm drain, backfilled and paved the area. The cost of this emergency repair was $13,521.98. And tonight we're asking for a budget appropriation from the gas tax fund in the amount of $13,522. That concludes my report. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Nick. Is there any questions for staff on this item? Seeing no one, I will go ahead and ask if there's any member of the public that wishes to address the council on item 12.4. Good evening.
Hi, my name's Mac. I'm intimately involved in this because it was right at the base of my house. So I got to watch the fountain that started and the whole project that went on. My question, though, is I gather this is the total amount because the work has been finished. I watched it being done. What I became aware of about a week afterwards, when the project was finished, was an awful lot of large chunks of asphalt were coming loose and coming out into the roadway. And so my question is, and that's died down. I mean, that happened for about 3 days. I was concerned that it was going to cause traffic problems and that sort of thing, and it stopped happening. My question is, on something like this, do we go back and then review it in a couple of months to see what's happened? Because obviously there was a huge amount of flooding. I mean, as they opened up the road, it was like, oh, that big a sinkhole, my goodness. It could have been very major, I would think, if it had gone on for a long time. So I just want to know if we go back and review these things weeks later. That's my question.
Thank you very much. We'll see if we can't get that answered. Is there any other member of the public wishing to address the council on this item? Seeing no one approaching the podium, I will close public comment and bring it back to the council. And I had the same concern back. There was well, I mean, ideally we would have set Veer Camp up and just turned him loose and said pave all the way to Highway 50. And we'd have just signed a check. Yeah, it's now the mother of all potholes that has developed just downhill. So first question would be, what are our short-term plans to get the potholes patched?
So to answer your question, after that repair was completed, the city crew went back out there and cambered the storm drain to see if there were any other failing sections that would cause similar problems. There's also an upcoming project that I'll let the city engineer speak to in regards to a more extensive repair of Spring Street.
Thank you, Nick. The city has put forth a recommended project last fiscal year for the Spring Street pavement rehabilitation project. Upon initial assessment of the project site, we identified that, no surprise, according to this item, that we have some issues with our storm drain system. So moving forward, we are going to be doing a full inspection of the storm drain system, recommending some spot repairs and improvements, and then paving the project later on. We will need additional construction funding, and this next coming CIP cycle in fiscal year 1920 will be addressing that shortfall for the construction funds.
All right, thank you.
Sure.
Let me get a little further clarification. You did camera the storm drain, and there aren't any imminent failures at this point that we see.
At that point, there were not.
Okay.
There were some minor cracks, but nothing that looked as severe as that section that failed itself.
And so
There's the whole thing is old and could definitely use repair, but it didn't look like there were going to be any immediate concerns.
Okay. Then the issue that I know I have, and I know several of us have gotten complaints on, is the failed pavement just below where this repair took place. We need to go in there and make some temporary pavement repairs.
I was going to, I'll add to it because
Yeah.
I drive it every day.
Then the clarification too is I thought Spring Street was on our construction schedule for later on this year.
I did provide, I believe, an update some time ago, but I will go back and confirm. We actually did have it on the construction schedule, but we found that the funding that we had reserved for that did not cover all the paving costs, and it did not cover storm drain repairs. And so that's why we're coming back forward with additional funding for construction funds. The estimated cost of construction for the project is about $700,000.
For the
Yes.
entirety of Spring Street?
Yep.
All the way over the hill?
Yes.
And the storm drain
it's about
repair.
0.6 of a mile, full roadway width. Yeah.
What are we anticipating that shortfall is at this time between what we had originally
That's about the shortfall. Is about
Oh, that's the whole seven-
Yeah, I mean,
seven.
so basically, once we started digging into it, no pun intended, we found that it's a little bit more of a laborious project than we had originally intended. Originally, it was being pursued as a maintenance project, and once we realized the issues with the storm drain system, it kind of blossomed into a larger project, which will require full plans and specs and sending them out to bid.
Thank you.
Sure.
Patty, did you have any other comment
No,
to
I
add?
just, I already agreed with you and
Didn't mean
Michael. It just, I'm concerned because I knew that it had fallen and I'm still driving over it every day and I'm going, okay, is this just a little bit lower today? And I'm worried that it's still sinking, but you're watching it, so I won't worry.
And drive fast, yeah. Come downhill only. No, wrong lane. All right, we need a motion on this item. Kara, did you have any questions or comments on this? It's
No,
getting to
it's
be kind of an infamous piece of storm drain. Every year we flood a different section. And this time we almost got a car, so. But we appreciate Mr. Veerkamp coming out and assisting us, and certainly appreciate the Public Works crew making it safe during the weekend and getting a plate over it. So, is there a motion for the item?
I'll move to adopt the resolution.
Second?
Been moved and seconded. I'll ask for a roll call vote, please.
Mayor Acuna?
Aye.
Councilmember Borelli?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Saragosa?
Aye.
Councilmember Taylor?
Aye.
Councilmember Thomas?
Aye.
All right, motion carries. Thank you very much. We will continue to monitor Spring Street. Council reports from other agencies. And given the length of the meeting, let's see if we can maybe roll through these quickly. El Dorado Transit, yes, we did meet. Everything is well. I know I signed a bunch of checks today and we took a bunch of money in that is very important that comes from the federal and state air resource board that helps fund the transit operation. So, go, what is it? Think green or go green?
Go.
Green means go.
Green, yeah, green means go.
Transportation Commission.
We had a lot of discussion, we had a lot of reports. I'm thinking there's not anything that we need to bring up. We talked about the hotspot. That's kind of something that I really bring up all the time, and they are addressing it. And
Very good.
Yeah, we supported the was it the former director of the Placer Transportation
yes,
Authority
yes, thank you.
for a seat on the CTC, the California Transportation.
Celia McAdam
Yes.
is running for the, yes, and we supported
So
her.
it'd be great if we had someone that understands the rural
Yes.
areas
Oh, my
of the
goodness.
state to be on that commission, and obviously they
She
hold
was-
a lot of the
She was
funding for us.
wonderful with working with Sharon and with Kathy, and now, and she's got so much knowledge, and she's done so much for that area, Placer County, and we just feel like she'd be a great representative to have helping understand our needs.
So when will we find out?
That's for Governor Newsom.
Oh, that's an appointment, huh?
Yes.
Okay, well, we'll keep our fingers crossed. Thank you guys for the report. LAFCO, yes, we did meet. I wound up running a meeting. We were a little short of folks last night. Everything is fine. No updates on the fire. I did ask Jose and Cleve to get together to have a little presentation for the council, I believe, in April, Cleve?
I believe we have it scheduled for the second meeting in April.
And we'll also ask him to give us an update on the fire district consolidations. So I think that'll make that a little more interesting for us. SACOG, Vice Mayor Saragosa.
Our next meeting is on the 21st, and then of course we have the regional meeting here with SACOG staff for the MTP SCS update for the rest of the elected officials in public. And that's basically it.
Thank you. And 2 by 2, we're getting that scheduled.
April 1.
April 1st is our next tentative meeting, and we're working on agenda items.
No joke.
And Mayor Acuna, I just really quick want to, I received this in the mail today from PG&E, And it's called Please Open for More Information on Upcoming Safety Work in Your Community. And I just wanted to bring it to the attention that, they're still,
They're out there working.
they're out there working and
All right, thank you.
informing us.
Item 14, request for future agenda items. Is there any items for future agenda, council members? Saying nobody. City manager report and staff reports. Oh, yes, Clay Street update.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. As requested, staff is here to provide an update on the Clay Street Bridge Replacement Project. You may recall the prior update at Council's November 27th meeting touched on the progress to date for the California Environmental Quality Act and National Environmental Policy Act, NEPA and CEQA processes. In April of last year, the public review and comment period for the draft environmental impact report concluded. The city did receive 19 individual comment letters, 40 individual comment emails, 8 letters from groups and organizations, and 4 agency comments. Since that time, staff has thoroughly reviewed the comments and received and is completing the process of drafting responses to those comments and questions. The city also conducted Section 106 consultation meetings with the interested parties such as the Ancient Order of the Druids, Friends of Historic Hangtown, and the local tribes, including Nisenan Miwok, tribe, and the Shingle Springs Band of Miwok Indians. A common theme amongst the consultation comments was the consideration of a potential of a historic district within the vicinity of the project. For the purposes of this federally funded project, the city and Caltrans agreed to assume district eligibility under the National Register as it applies to Bulletin 15 and the criteria establishment for national historic districts. This assumption prompted an update of the project's cultural reports. As stated in the last council update, the reports were updated and submitted to Caltrans at the beginning of January and received comments from Caltrans at the end of February, causing some additional delay to the schedule. The project team is currently addressing those comments and preparing to resubmit the documents to Caltrans. Once Caltrans approves the revisions, the revised cultural resources evaluation will be submitted to the State Historic Preservation Officer, SHPO, for review and concurrence. Staff collectively felt it would be helpful to have the approved cultural information included in the final EIR once Caltrans has completed the review and concurs with the data. Once that information is added into the EIR, it will be brought forward to Council for certification. That concludes my report, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you very much, Ms. Neves. One question I would have, and when would you anticipate it coming forward to the council?
Right now, with some of the delays that we've had in the review turnaround time, it's I would say that it's more contingent upon the review time from SHPO. Once we get that concurrence from SHPO, that will basically solidify the evaluation criteria, and basically it sets the tone for how it's being assessed for the cultural resources.
Okay. And has it been submitted to SHPO?
It is in process of being reviewed with Caltrans. So we submitted to Caltrans. Caltrans provided comments. They're pretty inundated workload-wise, as we all are. And so it took a little longer than we had hoped. We received the comments on, I believe it was the 21st of February, and we are in the process of responding to those comments. We're nearly complete and going to be resubmitting, I believe, on the 14th, which is Thursday. And once Caltrans reviews the comment responses and they're satisfied, they will approve the documents and move them forward to SHPO. And at that point, SHPO has, I believe it's like 45 days to review for concurrence. So once we get that concurrence from SHPO, we would bring it forward. Right now, the tentative schedule is about May, early June. It's taken a little bit longer than we'd all hoped.
So let's say no sooner than late spring.
We will do our best.
And that's fine.
Yes.
And I don't mean that as any sort of criticism towards the process, but just to be clear that it's kind of a back and forth process.
It is.
And we are fulfilling all the obligations as they're presented to us, questions from the other agencies. And so then it will eventually get into the SHPO where they have 45 days to respond. and we have to just assume they're going to take all 45 days. Why wouldn't they?
Correct. And,
It's
there's
just the
a
way it
degree
is.
of thoroughness that needs to
Yeah.
occur in this.
No, absolutely.
So-
So I just want to, it's just for clarity that it's very much moving forward at a very calculated pace.
Yes.
All right, thank you. Is there any questions on that report? I suppose I should ask if any member of the public wants to comment on the engineer's report, this little update. All right, thank you.
Oh, Kathy's.
Oh, I thought you were shaking no. I'm
Good evening
sorry.
again,
Good
Kathy
evening.
Lishman. I was going to actually talk to Rebecca afterwards, but
Okay.
since the Druids were consulted separately, and that planter in that area is a community pride planter, I was just hoping that maybe community pride members could be consulted too.
Oh, sure. I'm sure she can make that happen. Thank you, Kathy. That's a beautiful garden. I see where all the bulbs finally found their home. That's a long story. All good deeds. It all worked out well. All right. Mr. Morris,
Could
did
I
you have
make
anything
one
else?
more report just
Sure.
quickly? This just happened today. As you recall, we talked earlier about the solar project. The other half of that Johnson Controls project is the new lighting and heating, air conditioning units for all of our buildings. Our loan application finally got to the California Energy Commission business meeting today and was approved for $730,000 to do all of that work. That is a 1% interest loan, which is a good rate for what you can get today.
That's
I don't think you beat it.
fantastic.
So at your next meeting, we'll be coming back and asking
1%.
for a notice to proceed for Johnson Controls to proceed with that project. So that basically replaces all of our lighting in our buildings with LED lighting, lighting controls, and then all of our heating and air conditioning units in our buildings also will be replaced as part of that project. So,
That's excellent news. Could we try for 0.5%?
we could.
You know,
Schools get 0% interest. We get
1% is great, and the efficiencies that we're going to save.
along those lines, there's, PG&E also has a program that that if you fall into a certain income level, that they are replacing lights and refrigerators and all kinds of, and there's no interest. It's all for free.
Just to note on that, also that loan, that project has a 13-year payback period on it. So.
Oh, pardon me. I was being bad over here. All right, upcoming items tentatively scheduled for our next regular meeting on March 26th include the Pacific Street closeout, Ray Lawyer Drive paving contract. That is long awaited and good to see. More Broadway sidewalk amendments, three of those, and a regional housing needs allocation presentation. So that sounds like that ought to be a very good meeting. Look forward to it. So with that, I will adjourn us to our next scheduled meeting on March 26th, 5:30 closed session. Thank you very much and good evening.